Yes.
The Leaf Spring Army sends its regards.
Hello, everyone. I'm the Enforcer, and I'm accompanied by Enforcer Matt.
And good evening, folks. It's Enforcer Matt, and welcome back to day 1498 of the War News stream. And tonight we have big news as always. We never have little news anymore. It's always big. We have seen that U.S. airstrikes have begun obliterating Iran's coastline this evening as the war appears to be escalating despite reports to the contrary. We also see that Belarus is also preparing for war in Europe against an unknown adversary in a very weird escalation. And also Iran has launched one of their largest missile salvos of the entire war this evening as well. And it seems to be things are getting spicy. And it's good to see you all once again.
And of course, we're going to be covering the past 24 hours of news from around the world, as we have been able to hear significant developments out of the Middle East, Eastern Europe, Southeast Asia, the entirety of Europe, and also the Americas over the course of the day. According to the past 24 hours of information provided by U.S. Central Command's Area of Responsibility, the United States Air Forces have been conducting significant airstrikes inside of the Islamic Republic of Iran, and specifically on the city of Isfahan. Currently, we understand that several IRGC facilities and military complexes have been targeted and outright destroyed around the area of Isfahan, with a significant military armory going up in what can only be described as a near-nuclear explosion just due to the sheer volume and massive explosives that went off after the strike occurred inside of the ammo dump below. We also were able to see that additional heavy strikes were conducted within the Islamic Republic of Iran's capital over the course of the day as well, once again targeting government institutions and significant infrastructure of the Islamic Republic of Iran's military capabilities. The Iranians have responded today in a bit of a shocking upheaval by conducting one of the largest rocket and missile attacks seen so far in the war since the opening week, with around 10 missiles being fired at the state of Israel in a singular volley. And I do have to make it wildly clear here that that is actually the largest singular volley that we have seen outside of the first week of strikes that the Iranians conducted against the state of Israel. This is also giving us an indication that there are a significant amount of transport erector launchers that apparently have been largely sitting inert inside of some tunnels and storage facilities throughout the country and are now being deployed to help increase the volume of fire that the Islamic Republic of Iran is able to possess against the Gulf states and ourselves within the region currently. The United States has also been rumored to be conducting significant strikes along the Iranian coast, although unfortunately we do not have any video or picture evidence to be able to show exactly what's going on along the coastline. However, we do have further information about the Strait of Hormuz, and it has become exorbitantly clear currently that there is no plan to reopen the Strait of Hormuz. Due to a speech by the President of the United States just about 40 minutes before we went live on air, the President of the United States has stated that the Strait of Hormuz will open naturally once the conflict ends, meaning that this entire time, our analysis on the channel was correct, that there was no plan to deal with the Strait of Hormuz, there is no plan to deal with the Strait of Hormuz, and there isn't going to be a plan to deal with the Strait of Hormuz. As a result of these statements, oil prices skyrocketed $7 per barrel for WTI prices, and Brent prices have also reflected a similar jump as well, as the resulting statement came out that the United States largely does not have a plan to open the Strait of Hormuz. However, we were able to hear that apparently the U.S. is threatening the Iranians to reopen the strait once again today, and is stating that if the Iranians do not open the strait, the United States will of course conduct the major attacks against their energy infrastructure, desalination plants, and so on, to see that there is eventually such a large amount of hits and suffering that there would be a forcing largely of Iran's hand to reopen the strait. Meanwhile, the United Arab Emirates also came under an attack today, and a tanker off the coast of Qatar was also directly hit by Iranian fire. It appears that a British company near to Erbil also took direct attacks today by the Islamic Republic of Iran, and explosions for the first time that we've been able to document were confirmed around the very northern Iraqi city of Duhok. We've also been able to get some further confirmation that U.S. Air Forces have been operating in air defense in the area of western Iraq, and we've also gotten reports out of the Muwafaq Air Base inside of Jordan that around 18 additional A-10 Warthogs have arrived in the theater to prepare for operations against the Popular Mobilization Forces within the Republic of Iraq and other Iranian militias aligned with the Islamic Republic of Iran throughout the region, but not directly against Iran from what we understand at the moment. We've also seen that the Israelis have been conducting some missile interceptions over their sky over the course of the day. While all of this has been going on in the direct conflict in the Middle East, the global oil situation is continuing to deteriorate, with Romania stating that they are seeing that fuel shortages are an inevitable certainty at this point, and they will have to begin rationing effective nearly immediately. The Philippines has also announced that they only have enough fuel reserves to last for several more weeks before the country is completely deprived of fuel, meaning that their energy grid might go offline, and most transportation in the country, airborne, ground-based, and ship-based, may cease as there will be no more available fuel to continue those operations. We've also been able to hear as well that the United States of America is now currently in negotiations with the Kingdom of Denmark to attempt to expand U.S. military operations and U.S. military facilities on the island of Greenland, which is a territorial possession of the Kingdom of Denmark. Additionally, we've also been able to see that as of today, the United States of America has seen a significant success in the realm of science and space exploration, as the Artemis II launch was successful, sending our astronauts once again back towards the moon to be able to conduct an orbit around the moon and conduct preparatory actions and research to be able to see that future Artemis missions are actually successful in landing on the surface of the moon. We actually have a little bit of footage of that to show y'all here on air. We've also been able to hear that according to the United States Southcom area of responsibility, it does appear that U.S. Special Operations Forces may actually be involved on the ground in Ecuador, according to a statement that they made earlier today, although it's still largely ambiguous as to whether or not it is. We've also been able to hear as well within the area of Washington, D.C., a significant amount of statements, including that the United States is apparently going to be threatening to halt all weapon shipments to Ukraine, even the ones that the Europeans are buying with their own dollars, if they do not support reopening the Strait of Hormuz and basically doing it for us. We've also been able to hear that the Secretary of State came out today and gave about 13 reasons why the war with Iran started, and we've also been able to hear that apparently we're going to be tripling the production of PAC-3s, and there's supposed negotiations going on with Iran right now to try and reopen the Strait of Hormuz, largely once again touching all bases today. But with that in mind, we've also seen that in Eastern Europe, just to make sure to knock this out really quickly, folks, that there have been significant drone attacks conducted once again by the state of Ukraine. They did knock out the entirety of the energy grid within Crimea once again, and Russian Federation armed forces have taken significant losses and appear to be making no progress whatsoever, while Belarus has also stated that they are preparing for a larger conflict in Europe, most likely against NATO. With all this in mind, we have quite a significant amount of news to cover here over the course of the stream. But with that in mind, we are going to be making sure to get into all of this, starting with our largest stories first and moving our way on down into the smaller stories throughout the night. But before we do, we actually have major breaking news coming out at this moment. And Matthew, what do we got?
Okay, so it looks like Iran has decided to go berserk. After the president's speech ended, it looks like Iran has just launched a pretty massive attack against Israel. And it looks like the sirens are currently going off in Haifa, apparently, in northern Israel, due to incoming Iranian ballistic missiles. And it looks to be a pretty large attack. There's alerts literally all over the place in the most northern part of Israel. So it looks like they were retaliating for that speech for the most part. Also, by the way, in addition to that, we also have all the alerts as well on the top of the Twitter page to show people. We've also seen that apparently the Secretary of War has issued a statement himself, and he said on X or Twitter, it looks like, he said, "Back to the Stone Age," which generally echoes what the president was saying in his speech this evening, that he intends to send the Iranian government back to the Stone Age by pretty much wiping out all their infrastructure for the most part. So pretty much echoing that sentiment as well. So it looks like Iran's trying to get ahead of that by launching an attack on Israel, and I would also suspect they're probably going to launch an attack on the Gulf states probably as well. So we are seeing, by the way, that oil prices are currently surging right now. It looks like people have gotten a little bit panicky after that speech. And we're also seeing stock markets. They also took a dive earlier as well when they were open. So it looks like a lot of fear kind of going around right now. But Enforcer, what say you?
And it does appear that at the moment, the statements by the President of the United States haven't really done anything to calm markets. In fact, it appears to have sent them into a minor panic, as we did get to see that any of the price adjustments that were largely starting to reset the oil prices to a lower level, to what might be considered a higher level of what the pre-war prices were, has largely been erased, as we were able to see that the price earlier this morning was around $105 a barrel, and right during the president's speech, it then returned back to $105 per barrel, wiping out any progress at lowering the prices over the course of the day. That also was reflected in the WTI crude prices, which actually saw that their prices are now resting higher now than they were even earlier in the morning at around 1 a.m. So we do generally understand that the oil markets are not doing all too well, and we also understand that the Dow also doesn't really appear to be doing that well today either. The Dow is no longer at 50,000 points, folks, sadly, much to the dismay of many. As we were able to see that about 6 months ago, the Dow was at 50,000 points, but as of right now, the Dow is sitting around 46,000 points, or 46.5 thousand to be exact. And it also does appear that it is taking a little bit of a dip over the recent moments. So we are generally seeing that nothing's really going all too well, at least on the economic side of things right now, but we'll be hoping to see that it rebounds at some point, maybe in a couple of months.
Also, by the way, I see several people asking, well, why is the markets, and especially the oil price, starting to increase after the speech? Because, honestly, there wasn't much new said in the speech. If you didn't watch it, you really didn't miss anything. It was pretty much the usual stuff being repeated. It was just being repeated verbally this time instead of in a Truth Social post. So nothing really new, I would say. But my speculation is the reason why we're seeing the oil futures start to go up dramatically is because of the one statement about the Strait of Hormuz that it'll allegedly reopen naturally. I think that worried people because I think some people were expecting that maybe he would announce a very clear and distinct plan to reopen the strait, but he did not. He said it's going to reopen naturally on its own accord, which suggests that there is no plan to reopen the Strait of Hormuz. So I think that is the one key statement that probably caused the situation with the oil prices going up as we can see it now. Other than that, I'm not really sure why they would.
And that is actually what we're generally understanding at the moment, because I want to make this quite clear, folks, that during the statement by the president just about actually it would have been about an hour ago at this point, the president stated very clearly that there really is no plan to reopen the Strait of Hormuz, and they're not even going to reopen the Strait of Hormuz, and it'll just open naturally once the war actually ends, which, as far as our analysis has been going on the channel, we've been saying these three things. There was no plan to open the strait, there is no plan to open the strait, and there isn't going to be a plan to open the strait. And it wasn't even considered in the war planning whatsoever at the beginning of the war, and it's still not being considered now, while it is a major issue all the same. And that statement in the address largely gave us the verifiable facts that the U.S. does not have a plan to open the Strait of Hormuz, never did, and it really doesn't even have a concept of a plan right now, on when it would open the strait, if it even could. That's not to say that additional threats were issued today by the president demanding that the Iranians reopen the Strait of Hormuz. Those were made, also reversing yesterday's statements that it's not our problem and it's entirely on Europe. Now it's apparently on us again, and now we're threatening the Iranians that if they don't open it, we're going to start bombing them into oblivion. So, we'll be working off of that later, but at the moment it does appear that we cannot see any verifiable proof at this point that the United States has a plan or ever did to reopen the Strait of Hormuz. So with that, it is time for us to move on into the news that we have for the night, starting with our largest stories first and then moving our way on down into the smaller stories throughout the night. Moving us on into our largest stories throughout the day, we were able to hear that the United States Air Forces of the Air Force and Navy have been conducting significant strikes once again throughout the Islamic Republic of Iran and have been able to conduct significant damage against Iranian military facilities throughout the country once again today. Specifically, the city of Isfahan has come under a heavy fire and does appear to be suffering extreme and strenuous damage to a large amount of Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps facilities that exist on the periphery of the city. We were able to get video footage today showing that one ammo depot was directly hit and appears to have suffered absolutely catastrophic secondary explosions, which we believe have completely obliterated the area of the facility and most personnel that were on the facility as well in the midst of the strikes, which we were able to see in this clip right here. So here's the clip. That's quite large. That's about near nuclear sized, honestly.
Yeah, it looks like lava, like coming out of a volcano or something. It's really a wild sight. And this is the second time the Isfahan's been hit, in days in a row, actually. So they're really hitting something hard in that location.
Yeah, they really are. From what we know, this might actually be a new facility because from what we can tell, this is not the explosions of the U.S. bombs hitting the facility. These are the explosions that came after they were bombed. So these are what are called secondary explosions for anyone who might be a little bit new to this. Secondary explosions are incredibly common in any location that houses a large amount of ammunition because when we hit it with a bomb, our bomb generally sets off some of that ammunition and creates what's called a munitions fire, and then a secondary explosion can be created from that where there's a chain reaction in the base where all of the explosives there might go up in a giant singular explosion, which seems to be what we were seeing right here in this clip. So let me show this to y'all from the beginning just to try and give y'all a idea of the scale of this explosion. There it is right there. This is unbelievably large and showing a major ammunition depot appears to have been hit today. We'd also see it from a distance right here.
That's crazy, honestly. I'd heard that there was a barracks also near this location as well, apparently.
I did hear that as well. I couldn't really find out how close it was to it. That also seems to be a video of the first initial explosions from airstrikes, at least right there. But it does seem that there was a barracks, or at least there's been a barracks that was reported to be around the area, but we haven't really been able to tell all too well. This is also an additional clip that we have of those explosions in Isfahan. Once again, we believe that it's definitely, without a doubt, an ammo depot, but there also was word going around today that there was some sort of an IRGC barracks near to this ammo depot, which may have been vaporized in the resulting secondary explosion. Dang, someone skirted. Man, someone skirted.
Honestly, I can understand. I wouldn't want to stick around this either. So that's probably some nasty chemicals. I would imagine in the air. It would be my guess.
Yeah, I would assume. I mean, that's got to be a lot of toxic material up there in the air. But it is once again confirmed that there were wildly successful strikes in Isfahan again today. We also were able to see some additional videos of strikes that were being conducted right here, but this one is incredibly short and appears to be very recent to the time that we were going live. And you can see it right up there in that hillside, by the way. It's very faint. It appears to largely be hidden behind the hill, at least the actual strike itself, but still showing that heavy strikes have been conducted in the hillsides around the city of Isfahan. To show you all this here really quickly in satellite view and give you all a little bit of a better idea of where we're seeing most of these strikes, Isfahan is a city that's generally surrounded by a decent amount of mountains. And if we look right here, for example, you can actually see these larger mountains near to the Sofim Mountain Park, and also a larger amount of mountains ones out here in the western regions, or the western hinterlands of Isfahan, and you can also see them over here on the eastern side as well. We generally believe that these strikes may have happened, or all of them, generally around the periphery of the city of Isfahan, as we do understand that the periphery of the city is dotted with a large amount of IRGC facilities, and also those of the official Iranian armed forces as well. We did get to confirm that way early on, either the US or Israel conducted a strike on the Isfahan Shahid Beheshti International Airport, striking and destroying most of the usable runways, taxiways, and also even some of the remaining possibly operational F-14s that were on the ground that the Islamic Republic of Iran's Air Force may use for air interdiction and air defense over the country. Most of those were destroyed, and the airbase's operational capabilities were knocked out. Not only that, but one of the largest metallurgical plants in the nation was also targeted here as well yesterday, and we do understand that that facility was knocked out. That seems to be more so in long-term war planning pictures for a strike on a metallurgical plant like that, but still showing that significant strategic damage has been conducted against Iranian armed forces and also critical Iranian infrastructure and economic industries like the steel plants that may cause Iran damage in a long-term protracted conflict. But moving on from that news out of Isfahan, we have also been able to see that there has been additional strikes happening throughout the country as well. We were able to hear that in the area of Tehran, there were some airstrikes that were conducted within the city, which we were able to see right here, as the smoke was rising from the aftermath of the explosions in the early morning hours way back earlier today. We were able to see several pictures showing the smoke rising from these explosions, once again confirming that significant airstrikes were being conducted within the area. The Iranians haven't gone largely getting hit without noticing it, and we did get to see that the Iranians did return fire today at a significant barrage, with missiles being fired throughout the entirety of central and western Iran, including this particular missile right here, which appears to have been fired from a transport erector launcher that was based and operating somewhere out of the western side of the city of Tehran in this clip right here. We can actually see that missile heading on out and, apparently from what we know, towards Israel.
Yeah, it looks like Iran has largely kept its missile launching capacity, at least somewhat. Like, it has been hammered quite a bit. Like the mobile TEL launchers, they've been getting smacked left and right by the American airstrikes and also the Israeli airstrikes as well. But the catch is, here's why Iran's still able to fire their missiles, because they are keeping some of their launch capabilities underground in bunkers that the U.S. simply can't reach. It's very similar, actually, to their nuclear infrastructure. There's some sites, like, for example, Pickaxe Mountain, that are simply buried so deep within the mountain that no matter what the U.S. uses, even if they use the largest bunker busters we have that's dropped from the B-2 stealth bomber, it really can't guarantee that it will destroy that bunker itself. So that's what Iran's doing. They'll bring out some of these launchers from these bunkers very deep within the mountains. They'll bring them out, fire the missiles, and send them right back in, and it's very hard to hit those because they're hidden. So that's how we saw, like tonight, one of the largest salvos get launched at Israel is because they keep doing that, which I'm not really sure how the U.S. is going to really deal with that if they keep hiding them like that.
And it certainly does appear that it is a considerable issue, as we did get to hear earlier today in a larger missile attack that around 10 ballistic missiles were fired at Israel alone this morning, which is one of the largest salvos that we have been able to record, and most independent analysts out there have been able to record since the first days of the war, or really that first week. Generally, over the first week of the conflict, we did see that Iran's volume of fire for traditional ballistic missiles and intermediate-range cruise missiles were fairly high, but over the course of that week, the first week of the war, we saw that that begun to be heavily degraded by significant airstrikes by the United States and Israel that were largely targeting and knocking out most of those systems before they could ever really go back and hide and rearm. However, we saw today that there was a larger amount of missiles fired over a singular period of time than there has been since that first week of the war. And that's giving us an understanding that the Islamic Republic of Iran's missile capabilities have not been 90% destroyed. It may be somewhere around 70% or 60% even. I would generally go with 70% being a pretty decent ballpark figure, because they've probably been able to keep a decent amount of transport erector launchers that are still operational inside of tunnels and hidden facilities throughout the Islamic Republic of Iran that they're now rolling out and putting into service to try and supplant and reinforce their dwindling numbers of strategic rocket forces that are conducting the attacks against Israel, the Gulf states, and U.S. forces within the region. That would also give us an understanding that the United States would have to conduct further airstrikes and air operations on more so a tactical level, specifically aiming for and gunning for those transport erector launchers and missile forces when they're out in the open open and preparing to fire. A lot of people have also been looking at these strikes over the course of the day, which have been quite significant once again, and we've also been able to hear words and reports, but I want to make this clear, folks, that we really don't have a lot of video evidence of this at the moment, that there have been significant strikes going on along the southern coastline of the Islamic Republic of Iran. And a lot of people are wondering right now, what are these strikes being conducted for? There's a lot of strikes directly targeting IRGC facilities throughout the country, and we're also getting reports right when we were going live on air, and sadly we just haven't been able to get any video evidence of this to talk about this any further and what kind of damage may be inflicted on their coastline. And a lot of people are wondering whether or not that would be action preparatory work for some sort of an amphibious landing or a ground invasion into the country. And Matthew, what are people currently thinking about that right now, and what are you thinking about that as well?
Okay, so I do want to preface it like the enforcer mentioned that right now this is completely anecdotal. It's based on reports that we're hearing from eyewitnesses on the ground. So sadly, we don't have any videos to back this up right now, but based on the reports we're hearing, which are pretty widespread at this point, allegedly, U.S. forces have begun striking along Iran's coast today, and these are apparently pretty massive strikes up and down the coastline near the Persian Gulf. So is this a ground preparation possibly? The U.S. might be softening up the coast. 64% said yes, it's softening the coast for invasion, while 19% said no, it's to help reopen the strait, and about 8% said, I think it's something else. And if this is true, then I would say that it could be a 50-50 chance of either one, because obviously, if you want to help reopen the strait, part of doing that is to take out the missile launchers and the drone launching capabilities along the coast. The U.S. has been doing that since the war started about a month ago, but there's still a lot left from the looks of it, because they're still launching attacks on commercial vessels, and the U.S. even admitted that today. So it could be reopening the strait, but also at the same time, like the 64% said, it could be softening up the coast for a possible invasion. But the catch is this, though. If the U.S. invades, then they're not going to just invade the entire coastline. That's simply not possible with the forces we have in the region right now. We have enough forces in the region for a raid, for example, of one of the islands near the Strait of Hormuz, or possibly invading Bandar Abbas or maybe a naval port like that. But we can't start like a massive infantry raid of the entire coast. It's simply not in place right now. But Enforcer, what say you?
I would have to say that generally, I would have to be entirely honest with y'all folks, I don't really think that there is going to be any wider coastal invasion. So logistically, that would be next to impossible for us to actually conduct. We don't really have the sea lift or airlift capabilities to be able to support such a large landing force from airheads and beachheads. Really, nobody in the world does, and we're the best equipped. China can, like, just to put this out there, folks. China, which is about the second best equipped military in the world right now, conventionally, is having a hard time even imagining taking the island of Taiwan that's only about 70 miles off of their coast. The United States, which is even better equipped than them, would find it near impossible to see that there is no land basing for a ground invasion into Iran, and it was conducted entirely by sea lift and airlift. That just wouldn't really be possible, because we do not have the kind of naval forces and also sea lift capabilities that we had in other major amphibious landings, like the amphibious landings at Palermo and Sicily, or in Normandy in 1944. It just doesn't really exist in the modern day. For that reason, we can definitely conduct an amphibious landing or a ground invasion, but the scope of it would be far smaller than that of a front-wide coastal invasion across the entirety of their coastline at a singular time. Not only that, there's the major issue there that we don't have any way to really even land troops in a place like Bushehr or most of the Iranian coastline, because we cannot get any forces near to that area of the coast to conduct an amphibious landing, because we can't get them through the Strait of Hormuz right now. Once again, meaning that really any beachhead right now would, of course, be fairly small, probably a singular beachhead, and probably only using several thousand forces or several thousand ground troops to be able to try and secure the area and create a beachhead, hopefully with a port facility and an airhead that could then be further reinforced from there. But the scope of that sort of operation wouldn't be all too large, and it certainly wouldn't lead to a ground operation that would then march all the way on to Tehran. Iran, in terms of land surface, is about the size of the state of Alaska, meaning that it would be quite difficult for us to see a successful ground invasion over such a wide area off of a single airhead and a beachhead to start off of. And additionally, there's not a large amount of infrastructure within these central areas of Iran, making our supply lines incredibly well stretched out, and not only that, bottlenecked through the mountainous regions and mountainous terrain that permeates over most of the Islamic Republic of Iran. So generally, if we see any sort of a ground invasion, which I'm highly sure that we won't be seeing that it will be coast-wide, and we also won't be seeing that it's an operation to try and invade and overthrow the Islamic Republic of Iran by simply occupying the entirety of the country and taking over. We'll probably see a
Yeah.
limited beachhead, and that would be about it.
Also, by the way, I have to admit, I'm not sure how many people in the chat watched the speech from the president tonight, but I got the impression from that speech that he was not entirely ruling out a ground operation. I really didn't hear him directly address it for the most part. I think he had mentioned briefly that it would be difficult to go retrieve the uranium from inside of mainland Iran. I think he did mention that, but he didn't necessarily rule anything out either. So, me personally, some people are interpreting his speech to mean that the war's winding down. To me, I interpreted the complete opposite way. It sounds to me like the war is going to keep going, and they said 2 to 3 more weeks at least. That was the statement, and I think a ground operation still might be imminent. I don't think we can rule it out personally.
I think that the statements that the war is going to be over soon are just statements to try and calm the market, because they've been saying for the entirety of the war it's only going to last another week, a couple of days, maybe a few more weeks. It's never been a long-term statement where this is going to be a really long-term sort of situation. It's never been phrased that way, even at the very first days of the war. So I believe that those statements are being made to try and calm the market possibly and see that it doesn't just start ramping up out of control, because right now, folks, the prices are actually remaining fairly stable, at least compared to the scarcity that's coming into effect around most of the world, and with a lot of countries already saying that they're going to be running out of oil and usable fuel probably within the next few weeks. Crazily enough, even at that, the oil prices aren't going wildly out of control. They're just gradually rising right now, but I think that's because the concept exists right now that there isn't going to be a permanence to this where oil will not be flowing out of the Middle East for an extended period of time, and for that reason the prices haven't gone out of control yet, because everyone's expecting they might just be able to weather this through, everything will be fine, and then the oil will continue to flow soon after. But if the war keeps going for a good while longer, which I'd have to agree with Enforcer Matt, it certainly does appear to be, because we're bringing in more ground forces conducting amphibious landing, which certainly would give us the idea this can't be ending anytime soon. And if that's the reality of it, then these prices are going to start skyrocketing, not because no matter how much the markets are attempted to be calmed by, pacifying statements that this will be over soon, because there just won't physically be any oil left in most of the world, and people are going to be dying to buy what's left.
Yeah, and also, by the way, I mean, in addition to the 2 Marine Expeditionary units which are on the way, one's already arrived. There's another one on the way. We have 3 aircraft carriers in the area. We have countless aircraft across the entire region. The whole place is infested with U.S. military aircraft. 50,000 troops. I mean, we got a lot of forces there. And even today, the U.S. just deployed a very new and advanced electronic warfare aircraft, which has rarely been used so far, that would usually support a ground operation. That was just deployed today to go to the Middle East. So while the U.S. is talking about 2 to 3 more weeks, in reality, we're deploying more forces and troops and equipment. And also, on top of that, they're also deploying apparently some more A-10 Warthogs to the region as well, in addition to special forces that just arrived yesterday evening. So I mean, for it to be winding down, it sure does seem like the deployments indicate something completely different. So it could be just misdirection, possibly.
It could certainly be some sort of misdirection. That's also possible. But we'll generally have to wait and see, folks, because apparently, according to one White House staffer, the strategy by the president is to say 12 different things so that way nobody knows what he's going to do. And I guess that includes everyone in the government as well, because nobody has a clue what's coming next. And generally, I can spitball a whole bunch of ideas of what could be coming. But, generally, I would tell y'all that the high certainty right now, out of all of the options I could throw at y'all, is that this war is certainly going to be continuing for a while, because there is absolutely no reason, by the way, folks, that the Iranians are going to stop their blockade of the Strait of Hormuz even when the war ends, because now they are taxing ships passing through and forcing them to pay tolls, and that's a huge moneymaker for the Islamic Republic of Iran. And if everybody in the world had to make an arrangement to where they basically have to pay tribute to the Iranian government to pass through the strait, that means that Iran is able to build up a war chest financially to even further reinforce themselves for the next war that could be coming around in the future, meaning that they are going to try and exert control over the strait, most likely for an indefinite period of time, because it's well within their benefit to do so, and really nobody in the world has the resolve to go down there and deal with it. Nobody in Europe does, really nobody in the Middle East does, and the only country that's actively involved in the war that could open the strait, which is us, are not attempting to open the strait whatsoever. And if in fact made it somewhat clear at this point, we might not be. We might be going for Karg Island at this point and just try and completely skirt around the Strait of Hormuz and still not deal with the issue. Who's to say? But anyways, moving on out of that, We have also been able to hear, speaking of the Strait of Hormuz, that there has been some significant developments around the area today. The President of the United States has now changed his statements from yesterday, where the Europeans were blamed for the whole issue and they were going to have to fix it. This was the new statement that was made today. Iran's new regime president, much less radicalized and far more intelligent than his predecessors, has just asked the United States of America for a ceasefire. We will consider when Hormuz is open, free, and clear. Until then, we are blasting Iran into oblivion, or as they say, back to the Stone Ages. So apparently it's now our problem once again to reopen the Strait of Hormuz, unlike yesterday where it wasn't our problem, it was Europe's problem. Now it's our problem again, and now we're threatening to keep bombing Iran unless they reopen the Strait of Hormuz. On the other side of the coin, the Iranians don't appear to be reopening this anytime soon, and as a matter of fact, we're now hearing today that ships that want to transit through the Hormuz are being asked to pay fees and Chinese yuan or some form of cryptocurrency to get a secret passcode, which they then give to the coastal batteries on shore to permit them to have safe passage through the strait and make it to the other side without being molested for the larger part by Iranian coastal defenses. So at the moment, we do understand that the Iranians are now largely running the Strait of Hormuz for whoever is allowed to go through, like a toll booth, or a toll booth, considering that I just said booth.
A toll booth.
Man, a toll booth. But outside of that, they're running it like a toll booth, and they're largely forcing people to pay money to them to the tune of millions for each passage, and then that allows just a handful of ships to be able to pass through. And Iran still has absolute control at this moment as to who they allow through and who they don't, and the people that they allow through even have to pay them for the honor of being able to pass through the international waterways of the Hormuz, and to also be able to try and avoid the minefields as well that the Iranians have laid within the area. A lot of people are wondering, with the Strait of Hormuz situation, would the Iranians ever reopen the Strait of Hormuz when this war ends, just naturally? And Matthew, what are people thinking about that? And what are you thinking about that as well?
Okay, so the U.S., if you believe the United States and you don't think it's misdirection, the U.S. is really putting a lot of weight on the Strait of Hormuz just simply reopening after the war is over naturally on its own accord. So that's a very big bet to make, I will say. And it looks like the markets are not liking that bet because it looks like the markets right now are currently reacting kind of negatively to the recent announcement. So what are your thoughts? 44% said, I disagree. Iran will keep the strait closed even if the war comes to an end, while 27% said the U.S. is simply doing misdirection and there is a plan and there is something coming that we don't see in the public. 21% said, I agree, it will resolve naturally all on its own accord. So here's the thing, folks. It's not going to reopen naturally. Like, I don't think it will. Iran knows that they have the West by the balls right now, and they are not going to let that leverage go. I can almost promise you that. Those sickos are definitely not going to let this situation slip by them. I can promise you. So the U.S. is either doing misdirection and trying to make Iran think that they're in the free and clear, and then they're going to carry something out, which is certainly very possible. But if this situation is not actually resolved by force by the United States or by the allies, I think the strait will remain closed, and the Iranians are going to keep basically the pressure on the entire West. So, right now, also, by the way, Iran's making a hell of a lot of money off of this. Like, they're currently charging $2 million in Chinese currency for ships to pass through. They get the secret passcode, whatever that might be, probably like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 or something like that. The ship passes through, and China and all the adversarial countries, they're still getting their oil. They're still trading. They're not disrupted. It's the West that's being disrupted. So it affects all of us. So we'll have to see. But generally, I would disagree. I'm with the 45%. But Enforcer, what say you?
I didn't say that I'm with the 45%. The Iranians are certainly going to be keeping this thing closed well on into the future. We do have to remember, folks, that the Islamic Republic of Iran is a radical theological regime, meaning that they're driven more by religious zeal and their belief that the West, and specifically America, is the spawn of the devil and largely infidels, that keeps them going and keeps them united as far as their government is concerned to be able to wage their holy jihad against our allies within the region, ourselves here in America and inside the region, and against Israel as well, considering that they consider Britain, the United States, and Israel to basically be the three-headed serpent that is their sworn enemy. So for that reason, they're going to try and punish us once we leave. There's no reason at all that they would lift the blockade on the Strait of Hormuz. They want to try and find a way to destroy us, and they have never played fairly. If they played fairly, why in the world are they supporting and funding terrorist forces in Lebanon, in the Gaza Strip, and also in southern Yemen and in Iraq to be able to try and undermine U.S. interest within the region and also try and conduct heinous attacks against innocent civilians and also U.S. forces within the region? That clearly clearly shows that they're not a country that's going to be playing fair. And if they're a country that would play fair, why in the world is it that we are concerned in the United States at the official governmental level that some Iranian-affiliated individual is going to conduct a terrorist attack on our own home soil? That clearly shows this is a country that does not play honestly or fairly. And that also shows that this is a country that will go to any length to see that we are damaged in any way. And by continuing to keep the Strait of Hormuz closed and largely letting people through that they want to let through, and then not letting others through that they don't want, they are able to start largely bleeding the United States and the Western sphere dry in the future, and they're also forcing the Europeans into an interesting conundrum, which this is one that they might actually jump at the opportunity of. With the United States continuing to distance themselves from Europe and also putting themselves in a hostile stance with Europe, Europe is already not that big of a fan of the United States of America, and currently the Iranians are conducting a blockade on all ships that are Western affiliated. If the Europeans take that final step, which the Iranians might all be for, and also the Russians might be begging them to try and make this offer to the Europeans, that if they largely distance themselves and completely sever their ties to the United States of America and pretty much go create their own separate sphere of influence, or just largely stop having any dealings with the United States, their ships will be allowed through, but under the condition that they do absolutely no trading whatsoever with offloading oils at U.S. ports, if that was ever an attempt that European companies would try and do. And the Europeans might jump at that, considering that their strategic relationship with the United States really isn't that good, and there's really not a lot there to be proud of at this point anymore, at least in their mind. And on top of that, that would alleviate their fuel crisis issues that could be coming up here in the future. And so we might see that that is an option that the Europeans jump at, because it doesn't really seem like any of them are apt at the moment to go down there and try and forcibly clear the Hormuz. There's also the other fact that the Iranians could try and keep the Strait of Hormuz closed for largely everybody that's in the Western sphere, whether the Iranians try that attempt on the Europeans or not, and that could see that our economic sphere here in the West is greatly weakened. Without oil to keep our economies flowing here in the West, oil prices are going to soar. That is massively going to benefit the Russian Federation, the Islamic Republic of Iran. It would hurt China, but the Chinese can make some side arrangements with the Iranians and the Russians to see that they might be able to skirt around that without being too heavily damaged. But here in the Western world, we may see that fuel shortages become incredibly common if this becomes a permanent setting, and this could also mean that economic damage becomes largely permanent at this point if we do not find some way to forcibly open the Strait of Hormuz. So I would have to say that I'm well within the majority there, that the Iranians are going to keep that closed because it's well within their interests at this point strategically and for their larger foreign policy ambitions to see that they're able to screw over the United States as best they can, meaning that if we pack them and leave, they're not going to be leaving the Hormuz.
Yeah, pretty much so. Also, I do find it interesting, just on a side note, that Iran is collecting the toll that they're charging the commercial oil tankers passing through the Strait of Hormuz. They're charging that toll of 2 million yuan in Chinese currency. They're not charging it in the Iranian, what is it, the rial is their currency, I believe?
I think
is that
so,
correct?
yeah.
Yeah, they're not charging it in their currency. They're not charging it in the ruble. They're charging it in the Chinese yuan, which is kind of interesting to me. And I would say that proves to the fact that China is definitely having a hand in the whole situation. And it seems to be for some economic nefarious purpose, for the most part, that they're trying to collect it in that currency. Is when I heard that, I was like, why would they collect it in a Chinese currency? It's like sort of a weird thing to do since Iran has their own. But, you know, there's obviously something behind it, I would say.
I would definitely have to say there is something behind that for sure, and it does appear that they have larger ambitions at this point with continuing to control the Strait of Hormuz. Also, by the way, folks, in their presentations for a ceasefire or a peace treaty with the United States, they've continued to reiterate as one of their key terms that they want international recognition of their absolute control of the Strait of Hormuz, meaning that even in their current negotiating stance, they demand that they keep permanent control of the Strait of Hormuz as their own territorial waters to do with as they wish, largely meaning that at that point we would have to agree that their blockade would continue largely indefinitely well into the future because of that recognition if we ever agreed to it. So with that in mind, I hope that does address it the best I can. And moving us on and out of the Islamic Republic of Iran itself, we've also gotten other reports throughout the region today. For one, 18 A-10 Warthogs have arrived to the Muwafaq Salti Air Base inside of Jordan to prepare for ground operations against the PMF in Iraq and other Iranian-aligned militias and forces throughout the entirety of the region. We also were able to see that just minutes ago, while we were on air at the start, it does appear that the Iranians are conducting another significant missile attack against the Israelis, and interceptions were seen over Tel Aviv earlier in the day, which we were able to see right here.
Yo.
Yo.
That's the end of that clip right there. And moving us on out of Israel, we've also been able to see that within the area of the Republic of Iraq, there has also been significant actions that have occurred over the course of the day, including, pretty impressively, a U.S. F-15 Strike Eagle conducting a gun run to shoot down a drone that was flying over western Iraq. Here's the clip. We see the F-15 right there. Now you see it right behind the drone, and conducting a pass right in front of it. I believe trying to conduct a crank to get behind it here. Oh, actually, as a matter of fact there, apparently we missed a gun run at the start. It actually hit the drone successfully and was flying at an incredibly slow speed to be able to try and land the hit. And once it landed the hit, it then peeled off from behind the drone. The drone then went out of control, and we can actually see it right there slamming into the field, apparently right around where that other plume of smoke was. So pretty impressive to see that sort of an air defense action being conducted by the United States Air Force in western Iraq, and a successful one at that. We've also been able to hear some additional news coming from the northern regions of the semi-autonomous Republic of Kurdistan in Iraq, where there have been reports of explosions in the city of Duhok over the course of the day, with these two clips showing the air defense action and explosions over Duhok over the past 24 hours. See one of the explosions right there, and we also were able to see an additional clip here showing the attacks on Duhok. And we hear some significant air defense fire, and unfortunately a direct explosion. That's the end of those clips, but showing the direct attacks on the town of Duhok. In Erbil, we also were able to confirm that it appears that a British petroleum company, the Castrol Oil Company, was attacked inside of Erbil, with this clip here showing the fire and damage that had been caused to the British Castrol Oil Company within the area of the city of Erbil, which we were able to see right here.
That is interesting they hit that. Also, Iran's been making all kinds of threats against the Western technology companies that are also like stationed in some of the Gulf states and some surrounding areas and surrounding countries in the region. So far, we haven't seen those get hit. I heard there was allegations that some U.S. company's server facility got hit or something in the last 48 hours in the Middle East, but we weren't able to corroborate that. So for the large part, that Iranian threat has largely pretty much been deflated for the most part about them hitting American companies in the region. At least that's one threat that they haven't been able to follow through on.
And that is certainly quite lucky at the moment, and we would hope that that remains the case well on into the future. Additionally, in Qatar, the Qatari government did report that a tanker was hit overnight by an Iranian cruise missile within the area, and it appears to be the first confirmed anti-ship cruise missile hit on an oil tanker during the war so far. Additionally, the United Arab Emirates also stated earlier today that they had once again come under attack, with this issued statement by the United Arab Emirates Ministry of Defense, confirming that they were once again under attack and were taking defensive measures necessary to be able to try and protect the larger area of the airspace. CENTCOM's Area of Responsibility also put out a published statement today, largely talking about the assets that have been employed and the overview and types of targets that have been hit within the region. According to U.S. Central Command, they commenced Operation Epic Fury against Iran in the direction of the president at February 28, 2026 at 1:15 in the morning. CENTCOM forces are striking targets to dismantle the Iranian regime's security apparatus, prioritizing locations that pose an imminent threat. According to CENTCOM, they have stated that there has been 13,000 combat flights, 12,300 targets hit, and about 155 Iranian vessels damaged or destroyed. They've used, of course, a wide variety of aircraft that have been involved in the operations, and of course a large amount of ground and sea assets as well. We've also seen the types of targets that they've been hitting, at least at the moment, are command and control centers, IRGC headquarters buildings, IRGC intelligence sites, integrated air systems or air defense systems, ballistic missile sites, Iranian naval ships and submarines, Iranian air defense systems, anti-ship missile sites, military communication capabilities, ballistic missile and drone manufacturing, weapons production and storage bunkers, surface-to-air missile facilities, and military support infrastructure. So then is the statements from the United States on Operation Epifury that they were willing to disclose to the public earlier today. A lot of people are still talking about this massive Iranian missile barrage that was conducted on Israel recently, which I do have to tell y'all once again is the largest strike that we've seen so far conducted by the Islamic Republic of Iran outside of the first week of the war, which was almost a month ago at this point. And a lot of people are wondering whether or not the Iranians still pose a significant strategic threat within the region, or whether this was something of a once-off and kind of a fluke for them to be able to conduct. And Matthew, what are people thinking about that, and what are you thinking about that as well?
Okay, so about Iran launching their largest missile salvo, what do you think about that? Was Iran mustering its final strength, or is this an ongoing security threat to the entire region? 63% said Iran is still very dangerous and probably will be into the foreseeable future, while 25% said Iran just mustered its final strength and that's how they were able to carry out this massive missile attack. And 7% said I'm 50-50 on this one. So I would say, like I mentioned earlier, Iran still has a good portion of their missile capabilities. They're proving that every time they launch one of these attacks. And this is not an isolated attack. This is simply the biggest one that we've seen since the opening days of the war. So it's really safe to say that the region is still highly at risk because of this. It's not defeatist to say that. It's just simply reality. The U.S. has taken out every type of missile launcher that Iran has that's in the wide open. They've definitely hit those, but they can't hit the ones that are under the ground, which is problematic, and also keeps the region wide open still for the most part. So the only limitation that Iran has at this point is how many missiles they have in their stockpiles and how many that haven't already been destroyed for the most part. And we don't simply know the exact number that Iran has. But Enforcer, what say you?
I'd have to say that, in my opinion, I'd have to be with the 62% that the Iranians are still very dangerous, even outside of the fact that they were able to conduct this missile attack today, which largely goes against most of our analysis and predictions at the moment, and is showing that the Iranians do have transporter-erector launchers that are still operational in larger numbers than we knew about. The Iranians are still incredibly dangerous because of the strategic control that they are exerting over the Strait of Hormuz and the blockade that they are conducting right now, which is largely bleeding most of the outside world dry of most of the oil that they were relying on that comes from the Middle East. So, in my honest opinion, the Iranians still pose a very dangerous threat to the United States of America and the Western world. Really, the honest truth is, it doesn't really matter what other military capabilities they have, as long as they have closed the Strait of Hormuz and they are still not allowing ships through. The Iranians are dangerous for that reason and that reason alone. We can add a million other things to that make them dangerous, like, for example, the larger missile attacks that they conducted today, or they might have nothing else that they're capable of, and they're completely helpless except for that blockade on Hormuz. And for that reason alone, I would still say that Iran is an incredibly dangerous country to the United States, our interests in the region, and also our foreign policy and larger strategic ambitions over the long term. So I would say that they're clearly dangerous for that reason. But with that, we also have been able to hear some additional news today out of Crete, where some U.S. forces are based. Currently, it appears that the island of Crete is apparently in hell. I don't know where they ended up, but just to tell you all why this happened, this is a large dust storm that has blown over the Mediterranean, I believe from the Sahara. And so it's just a dust storm that's traveled over this way, and it looks quite red as a dust storm.
Why is it red? It's like, I get it's a dust storm, but I mean, typically isn't dust kind of like tan or dirt colored? It's not necessarily red. It's like, how's that happening?
Interestingly enough, they're usually like orangish red. Like if you look at some of the pictures here, like they can get fairly orange and reddish looking. It kind of depends on the quality and content of the sand. Like this one's getting on towards more the redder side. Some of them are like light tan, some of them are dark red. This one apparently blew over a specific area of the Sahara that had some redder sand granules in it, and for that reason, that's why it looks like this orangish red sort of a deal.
Honestly, if I saw this in real life and experienced this, I'm not a conspiracy theorist, but I'd be thinking, is this an omen of something to come my way? It's like this is pretty ugly right here. It's like you're looking at the apocalypse in front of your face. This is how you'd expect it to look if something went really sideways and people started nuking each other.
Man, I'm not gonna lie, man. If the ancient Greeks on the island of Crete saw this happen, they would think the gods were angry at them. Like they'd be like, "What did we do?" Like it looks like the sky is literally painted with blood at this point. Really, the whole area looks like that. Really, kind of crazy, honestly. But that's what happened in Crete today. A little bit of a interesting phenomenon, to say the least. And we actually have some news to share with you all on a little bit more of a positive note at the moment. Because we have the whole thing going on in the Middle East, which it's kind of a double-edged sword in a way. It's good in some ways today, and we have some good things to report, but still the situation really isn't the greatest overall that we've ever seen. But we do have some really positive news that came out of Cape Canaveral, Florida today, which we want to make sure to show to y'all and share with y'all here in a moment. But before we get to that news, I do want to make sure to say a humongous thanks to everyone who has been watching the stream so far tonight. Tonight we have gotten 95,000 people here in the first hour of the show, and we've also had a peak viewership of 22.7 thousand people. That's quite a lot of people. And I gotta thank you all so much once again for enjoying the show and watching it and considering it to be your primary source of news day in and day out, because we try our best to make sure to give as much information as possible in our news and also our analysis to be able to give you all a real clear overview of what's going on the day-to-day, not only within that area of the Middle East, but around the world at large. And we'll be making sure to get on into the rest of the news here in a moment. But before we do, I do want to take a quick pause here to be able to address 3 questions, and then we'll be moving on into the rest of the news for the night. And so, Matthew, what do we got?
All right, so let's jump right into our first 3 super chats and then right back to our breaking news. We do have one here, the first one from Music Uploader, who's a longtime channel viewer, and thank you very much, good sir, for that massive $100 support, which so far is the biggest one of the night, and we do appreciate that, and that does help to keep the channel running. And he said, LSA, and once we leave NATO, Ukraine war will be meaningless, since NATO expansion was what triggered the invasion, and wouldn't you say it's a victory for Putin? Also, 20 major trucking companies filed for bankruptcy, and none of us recovered post-COVID. So this is our final nail.
Oh, dang, I gotta say, that's somewhat concerning right there. Never really a good thing to hear about. But I do have to thank you massively for the support, and I'd have to say that generally I wouldn't really worry about us leaving NATO all too much. We're going to be getting into that a little bit tonight, but a lot of people have been hearing that apparently the president just wants to walk away from NATO, and luckily, folks, I have to tell you all that there is a very positive thing about that. I believe it was the National Defense Authority Act, if I'm not mistaken, Matthew, the NDAA, that was passed in
That's the National Defense Authorization Act of 2024. It was passed during the last administration that required the president to go to Congress to get that approval to leave NATO. He can't unilaterally, as the executive, simply sign a document and leave it. It's not possible. Technically, he could try, but it would be challenged and likely overturned, at least in my personal opinion.
And that's generally what we would assume at the moment. So as long as the Congress does its job and the Supreme Court does its job, because the unilateral action to walk away from the region when there's a existing act that has been ratified by both parties in the House and the Senate and was also signed off by the president, would mean that that action would be unlawful to conduct unilaterally, and therefore would most likely be overturned, and we wouldn't really be able to leave NATO unless we got a majority approval within the House and the Senate, so the entirety of the Congress, to be able to try and leave NATO. And I see some people saying he will try, but he will try with great fail, because there's no way to succeed on that. Kind of like how right now it appears that the whole argument in the Supreme Court about some other things isn't really succeeding either.
Yeah.
It doesn't really matter if you sit down in front of them and, try and cross your arms and pout at them. They're generally going to say something's unconstitutional or unlawful if it is, whether, someone likes it or not.
You know what's weird about the whole thing is it was actually not very clear whether or not a president could leave like something like the NATO alliance on his own unilateral accord. It was not clear until the NDAA of 2024 was passed in Congress. It wasn't very clear because the Constitution says that the executive, the president, can enter treaties with foreign countries. That's a power given directly to the executive branch. But the Constitution is generally silent about whether or not he can simply leave treaties or exit treaties without some type of congressional approval. It's really nothing being said about that for the most part. So that whole thing is silent in the Constitution. So that was the whole point of passing the NDAA during the last administration, was to prevent a president from unilaterally leaving something as important as NATO just over a whim. And largely speaking, that will largely prevent it for the most part. But it won't prevent a challenge. It'll probably be challenged. There'll be a huge fight about it. It'll probably be a huge deal, but it generally will prevent it.
Also, I see some people saying if the U.S. stops paying for NATO, it will disappear. Y'all are going to be blown away when we stop giving like the 60 million we give to NATO every year, that nothing will change and everything will just keep going the way it was. There's a common NATO fund that we pay into and we pay about $67 million into it every year. And outside of that, we don't give any money to NATO. Nobody in NATO gives any money to us, and any understanding that we're basically paying Europe to exist as a military is completely false. I mean, it's markedly false to the point it's almost slander against the NATO alliance and how it operates in the ignorance of the claim. There's just there like if the United States stopped paying $67 million into the Happy Meal and Lunch Fund that NATO has, it's not going to do anything. It quite literally nothing would change. The NATO alliance would still stand. So I hate to be the bearer of bad news to a lot of people, but the United States really doesn't carry the entire world like a lot of people pretend it does. It's just one of the largest powers out there, but that doesn't mean that every single ally of ours is nothing but a bitch on a gimp leash that's at our whim and call, because that's just not how the world actually works, unfortunately, for many people who think otherwise. And also, if you treat a lot of people like they're a bitch on a gimp leash, they might find out that they don't really like that, and they might get up and walk away, because, outside of some people, like, maybe the husband of the Department of Homeland Security, I mean, generally a lot of people aren't really, into the whole, gimp and leash trick, not really a big thing for most people. But outside of that, I hope that does address that part the best I can, at least from what I would know. But if we ever did somehow leave NATO, it really wouldn't be the greatest thing, because really it wouldn't change a lot. Russia would still view the United States as a strategic enemy, and they would still be, we would still be a sworn enemy of the Russian Federation, and the United States would be a sworn enemy of Russia. But as far as collective defensive action, NATO would be significantly weakened, because there's really no way at that point for us to be able to join into a conflict with NATO if they're attacked, which generally sees the deterrence factor of NATO is significantly reduced on the defensive side of things. So I hope that does address that the best I can, at least on that end, but I have to tell you, quite luckily, Music Uploader, we hopefully never see that happen, and if all of the checks and balances are followed properly, it cannot happen, because absolutely nobody in the Congress is supporting this action right now, or even the idea or statement that we might try and withdraw or leave NATO. Also, one other thing I gotta say is that the logistics industry in the United States hasn't really been doing all too well. Just to touch on that for a minute, the trucking industry hasn't been doing too well, and I've also been hearing that even the railroad industry, which is fairly economically robust, because they've streamlined themselves to try and be as robust as possible, they're even running into a little bit of issues as well recently because of some overregulation and underregulation in different aspects by the government, which you would think should be fixed, because we also know, like, this is one that's very rarely touched on, because usually overland and air transport is usually, if ever brought up, the only discussion on transportation. But there's also been a lot of mismanagement by the U.S. federal government on port authorities throughout the country as well, like the Port of Long Beach and others, because we hardly have enough longshoremen in most areas of the United States to run these ports efficiently, and there's also a significant backlog in most of those areas. So I hope that does address it the best I can, at least in my opinion, and a big thanks to you once again for support and helping this channel to keep on running. And with that, we are on and into the next one.
All right, so our second one's going to go to Pretzel's Garage, and thank you very much, Pretzel, for that $50 support, and we do appreciate that. And that does, of course, that guess what? It keeps the channel running, and we do appreciate it very much. And Pretzel said, here's a 50 for the train fund. How long do you suppose the gas prices will rise? And thank you for another great night of news and LSA. I'll tell you this, Pretzel. I'll tell you all this. I went to go get gas today. I've been really cutting down driving. Like, I have no real, necessity to drive for the most part, but you have to get out of the house. So, I mean, I go out on drives to get out of the house, so that way I don't go, stir crazy inside of my house. So I get out. So I went out today to go get gas, and I was like, okay, let's go get gas. So I drove down the road. The gas stations were showing about, I think it was like $4.50 for regular, and I have to get premium. I was like, my car doesn't take 85, it takes 90. So I was like, well, that's not good. So I drove on to Costco. So like, oh, Costco's got cheaper gas. I went there and it was $4.25. So it was a little cheaper, but it wasn't much better. And it cost about $60 to fill up my car when it usually costs about 30 for the most part. So it's doubled my gas bill. If I keep driving the way I usually do, it's doubled it for the most part. So it is troublesome. I will say, imagine if you have a gas guzzler, like a big old truck or SUV, they're probably paying $200 plus for a tank, I would imagine. So that's hurting them a lot more. But Enforcer, what say you?
I did say, sadly, Pretzel, I don't really know how much longer this is going to be going. It could go for quite a long time, depending on how things turn out. And right now, with it being incredibly clear, we have no plan to clear the Strait of Hormuz, and also to just let you know what we're hearing right now, which we're not going to be reporting on air officially, but I'll tell you all what we're unofficially hearing. Apparently, there's some sort of idea at the moment that the force that we're building up in the region for ground forces is apparently either going to be going to try and take Karg Island, or they're going to go on what can only be described as a one-way operation to go and try and find the uranium in Iran and maybe get it out. But how I'm hearing the plan described right now, it's basically asking all of these people to lay down their lives in the idea that this might be achievable and really won't be. So, that's the two military plans that we're hearing right now. And considering that a lot of our leaks out of the White House so far have been fairly accurate, even days before something was about to happen, we're believing that that might actually be the case. Right now at the moment, that we're not going to be trying to clear the Strait of Hormuz even with the force that we're building up right now, which is absolutely going to be insane if that is the case. But outside of that, though, I would have to say, generally beyond that, if the Strait of Hormuz remains closed for months somehow, the price of oil is going to rise quite significantly. I can't even say how far. Some people out there are already expecting $200 a barrel. Others are saying it's going to be $150, and I would go more so with the experts at this point. It's probably going to be somewhere in between $150 to $200 per barrel if this continues on for months, and especially once physical scarcity starts to take place, and we see that physically there's just not enough oil to go around. So with that, I hope that does address that the best I can, at least in my opinion, and a humongous thanks to you once again for the support, Pretzel Garage, and helping this channel to keep on running, because if it wasn't for folks like you, we wouldn't be able to make this thing possible. And of course, long live the Lee Spring Army, and the Lee Spring Army will never die. And with that, we are on to the final question, and then we're going to be getting on into the rest of the news.
All right, so the last one here is going to go to none other than Adibos, and thank you, Adibos, for that $50 support. And they're coming in with a hot one. I tell you, they're coming in with a hot one. They said, you mean a terrorist attack like murdering a country's religious leader and his grandkids in his home, and bombing a girls' school, and bombing social infrastructure, that kind of terrorism. But here's the catch. Here's the catch, Adibos. That right there is not based on reality whatsoever, because the religious leader you're referring to is a guy who said death to America and wanted to hurt and kill Americans. And what kind of religious leader is that? Also, by the way, he said death to Israel constantly, too. What kind of religious leader says that? Doesn't sound like a religious leader I would want to know, personally. Also, the girls' school situation, we have addressed that before. That was a highly tragic situation, and the U.S. is investigating it, and the U.S., I believe, will ultimately have to take responsibility for it, because there's really no hiding it at this point. And that's obviously a travesty, to say the least. And also, here's my thing. How are we going to get into stuff like this where it's like pointing the finger back to the United States, calling the U.S. a terrorist nation, when we literally are fighting against a country that's trying to develop nukes so that way they can kill people in huge numbers? It's like, that's a bit silly, I would say. But Enforcer, what say you?
I'd have to say that's largely misrepresenting the situation quite a large amount. To the point that it's largely just trying to, really degrade the United States name for no reason. The guy wasn't a religious leader. He's not just like the Pope wandering around the Vatican making nice statements. This guy was the supreme leader of the Islamic Republic of Iran. This man has the names of many Americans on his hands and their blood on his hands. He is, under his leadership, seen the rise of multiple terrorist organizations throughout the region, which didn't even exist under Khomeini, which was the only other supreme leader outside of him. This guy is the guy responsible for the funding of Hezbollah, Hamas, the Houthis, and al-Nusra in the region. We already know that Hamas itself in the October 7th of attacks of 2023 killed hundreds of people, largely due to the funding and order of Khomeini himself inside of Iran. So that largely representing him like he's just some little hapless religious leader is kind of downplaying the guy a little bit. It's like saying that Hitler only was ever a painter, and why in the world are we invading Germany to go and take out some painter? Well, I mean, he's the chancellor of Germany at that moment in time, so fairly different than just being a little hapless Austrian painter. He's an absolute maniac and a killer, much like Khomeini was. So, I'd say that's quite a misrepresentation of Khomeini's character. And I've never heard one that's painted him in that positive of a light, and I haven't even heard a single Iranian, outside of those loyal to the regime, ever paint him in such a hapless and innocent light as that. Outside of that,
not even his own people would paint him as like a innocent grandpa that was just a religious leader that was totally innocent. What about the tens of thousands of people that got mowed down by machine guns by the besieged forces inside of Iran? The people of Iran came out to protest which should be their right to protest. They should have the right to govern themselves for the most part within reason, and like anybody else should. But for doing that, the price of doing that, the people got mowed down by the tens of thousands, and the number that was stated today was about 45,000 people got mowed down by the so-called innocent grandpa. So I don't think grandpa's so innocent. Now, I think grandpa is probably no longer around to do anything else like that because he was such a sick bastard. I think he's kind of gone by the wayside.
And also on top of that, bombing a girls' school, we already addressed that quite a great deal on this channel, and most Americans that have any sense would say that that was absolutely reprehensible. And CENTCOM is investigating that at the moment to see if there's any sort of a tribunal or largely a court-martial that needs to be conducted for any I guess you could say malice or wrongdoing that was conducted on the behalf of the armed forces. For, incidents such as significant civilian casualties like that do happen, and it's one thing to applaud it, which the United States hasn't done. It's a whole other thing to actually investigate and see if there's any wrongdoing that can be prosecuted. And currently, right now, we're still undergoing that investigation. Investigations take time to see if anyone can be prosecuted properly for possibly conducting a war crime. Mistakes like that do happen from time to time, but still, we are giving it its due course to actually investigate it and see if anyone needs to be brought up on war crime charges here in the U.S. military. Additionally, bombing social infrastructure. I haven't seen the United States bomb any social infrastructure inside of the Islamic Republic of Iran. I haven't seen that at all. As a matter of fact, we've been bombing military sites throughout the country and government buildings. So I don't really know how in the world you're making that kind of a claim, because it's that government that we're currently at war with. So, of course, we're going to be bombing their military and their government facilities, because those are the military and administrative targets that we are trying to hit and destroy at the moment. And lastly, I'd say that generally what we're doing isn't any sort of an act of terrorism. I'd say generally the act of terrorism was Iran trying to produce a nuclear weapon and an ICBM to obliterate you with right now, because I think a lot of people are always a little bit ignorant of this, maybe even yourself, but that nuclear weapon could easily kill you much as it would me. So generally the U.S. is trying to protect the common citizenry like you and me right now from being vaporized in a nuclear hellfire if they continued on their track that they were at that point. So I thank you for the support. I hope that does address that well. And with that, we actually have breaking news coming out of this moment. And so, Matthew, what do we got?
Okay, so we've gotten a video out of Bahrain, it looks like. It looks like an Iranian ballistic missile apparently impacted near the home of the U.S. Navy's 5th Fleet headquarters, and it's obviously located within the Kingdom of Bahrain's capital, Manama, and we do have a video of that. So let's take a look at that, and then we also have some more breaking news after this.
And we see the missile coming in.
That doesn't sound like a U.S. force alert.
Not really. And there's the direct impact.
Jeez. I will never get over how that thing has like such a final fast descent. Like that descent, like the way it speeds up is just horrifying, the way ballistics work like that.
Interesting enough, it's not really speeding up a whole lot. It's just more so kind of like the POV that we have of it. Because right here, during its trajectory at the beginning of the film, it's pretty much coming right at the cameraman as far as its arc. So it's actually going at the same speed. It's just that our angle of our viewpoint on the missile is changing as its flight continues towards its end. And so then we get to see it at its actual speed about right here when it's actually hitting the ground. So it's not really speeding. It's not really speeding up a whole lot. It's just that we get to kind of see it from a bit of a different angle, which gives us a false perception that it's increasing in speed, when in reality it's keeping a fairly stable speed during its terminal phase right there. But still, unfortunate direct hit.
It's still just a very scary perspective, but also at the same time, though, we are seeing that apparently it seems like whenever something happens that scares people in the markets, it seems like South Korea is like the major front of the major like downfall of the economy. South Korea's markets have gone down over almost 4% after the comments tonight out of the United States. So South Korea appears to be one of the first ones getting hit by it. Also, we have seen that Brent crude has surged by 5%. It's now trading above 106. And I'm not sure what WTI is, but it's probably hovering around 100, I would imagine, would be my guess. We are seeing as well that it looks like, let's see, let me make sure I'm reading this properly. It looks like Russia has also been hit. I know I'm sort of bringing people for a bit of a loop here, but just for a quick second, it looks like the Ufa refinery, big Ufa, it looks like it's been hit. It looks like the Ukrainians have done a number on it, and it looks like the main processing stack right in the center of the oil refinery is currently destroyed and on fire. So that's a pretty long strike, by the way. That's 1,400 kilometers away from the Ukrainian border. So that's a pretty big hit on Russian oil infrastructure. I know it's a little bit off topic, but just to mention it at the same time, that's still happening. And apparently, there's a second attack also happening on that refinery literally right this second as I'm talking. So pretty big news on that front. But Enforcer, that is the breaking news as of right now.
And now it's time for me, Zelensky, to sing you a new song. Rest in peace to Putin. He got hit by a big UFA.
Man, I tell you, man, it's something else right there. But the Ufa refinery is on fire, so we are able to finally confirm our first hit from the ongoing Ukrainian attack right now. So we'll be getting to that here in a little bit once we get to the Ukraine war news. But a big thanks to Enforcer Matt for breaking that news for us here on air. Now it's time for us to move on to some positive news, folks. And of course, being a concerned citizen of the Republic and always looking out for its best interests, I do have to announce that we do have incredibly good news to talk about in space exploration, and not only that, also the progress of science and technology in our modern day and age. And this is the fun, folks, about living in the modern day, is that you get to see it all happen at the same time. You know, a war in the Middle East that's kind of not going all too well, and then amazing scientific advancements and leaps that we're once again making here in the States. Today, we were able to see that at Cape Canaveral Air Base, or Cape Canaveral Space Force Station, which it now is called, there was a launch today of the Artemis II rocket, which is currently carrying our astronauts on their way towards to the moon. They're currently in orbit over our heads right now, so if you ever want to, make sure to go outside and give those astronauts a wave. They can't see you, but it's just the thought that counts. We were able to see a little bit of videos today to show y'all, if y'all missed it, of the Artemis II launch, including the transportation of the astronauts to the launch pad and the Artemis II rocket, and also the launch of the Artemis II, which I'll show y'all here in a moment, because I actually got NASA's broadcast of that to show y'all here.
That's amazing there. Again, crowds could...
And I'll show y'all that without the audio, because we can see the transportation of the astronauts here, followed by an armored car. I didn't know NASA had those.
You know, they have a special response team, NASA does. I saw them yesterday. They're kitted up pretty serious. I guess they're expecting somebody to do something to the place. I don't know how many people are trying to, target the NASA site, but, they're apparently taking it serious. It looks like a Bearcat.
Yeah, it kind of does, It's interesting, honestly. But there goes the astronauts on their way to the launch pad. This was T-minus 4 hours to launch, just about, when this transportation to the launch pad was conducted. After this, the astronauts...
It's really remarkable that, we're finally going to the moon for the first time.
Man, I see what you did there. I see what you did there.
I say they're going on April Fools. I mean, it could be a big joke.
Oh, man, the Illuminati would obviously give us all a big hint that it was all a lie by doing it on April 1st. But outside of that, I also have NASA's footage right here for y'all folks of the actual launch of the Artemis rocket. I'm actually going to show this in its entirety because it is a significant leap for the United States technologically and scientifically once again. It has been about 60 years now since we have been to the moon for the first time on Apollo 11. And currently, the National Aeronautics and Space Administration is working on sending astronauts back to the moon once again. It really is something impressive to see that in our day and age and in this time, that while we were seeing everything else going on in the world and living through historic times in those ways, we're seeing that once again the United States is returning back to the stars and returning back to those far-flung celestial bodies like the moon, and eventually at some point Mars. But without further ado, here is the clip of the launch of the Artemis II rocket today.
10, 9, 8, 7, RS-25 engines lit. 4, 3, 2, 1. Booster ignition. And liftoff. The crew of Artemis II now bound for the moon. Humanity's next great voyage begins.
Look at that. They're going to be up there for 10 days.
Roger, roll pitch.
It's crazy to watch this thing, and to believe it's the size of a Saturn V.
Artemis II mission around the moon.
I wonder what it would be like to be inside that thing when it's taking off. you got to always have a little trepidation because you're literally strapped to like basically a controlled explosive.
A giant bomb, basically. It's a humongous bomb. I love the sound of it.
Launch system core stage. Integrity 3 miles in altitude. Traveling more than 1,200 miles per hour.
But that's the end of the little clip that we have for y'all there. NASA's been posting small clips and updates throughout the course of the day showing the astronauts in orbit. I can actually show y'all a little bit of that here really briefly because it's really interesting to me, I have to say, folks. I do find space exploration to be quite interesting. Here's actually a picture from the Orion spacecraft while it's in orbit right now. Pretty neat picture showing us a little bit of the Earth's circumference right there, and also showing the view that the astronauts currently have while they're in space. And we also were able to see that they were able to separate from their upper stage in this footage right here.
Stand by for separation.
You know what's going to happen when they come back, right?
What?
We have good separation, good motion.
It's going to be time for the announcement.
ATP go.
There's aliens in breeding programs.
So it turns out that we sent them out there to have a intergalactic meeting.
Houston copies.
All right, here comes the pitch rate.
They're going to visit the alien breeding program headquarters. They're going to check it out and tour the facility and see if it's up to spec.
They're going to Jabba the Hutt's brothel. It's going to be absolutely incredible. You're not going to believe it. But anyways, outside of that, that's what we're seeing right now from the Artemis program. A really impressive sort of a thing to see, and hopefully we'll be able to see, folks, that it is a successful mission, as we'll be paving the ground, or paving the way more so, for further missions to actually conduct landings once again on the moon. So hopefully we'll be seeing that this is very successful and is followed up by multiple other Artemis missions as well, which are already in the works and are already being planned to be conducted at a future time. So moving us on out of that big news out of the United States today, which I'm very proud to see once again, just to make sure to let all of y'all know that. But moving us on out of that news, we also were able to hear a little bit of news here in the United States of America today. And let me get y'all into that news really quickly. For one, we were able to hear that apparently the president threatened to halt U.S. weapons supplies to Ukraine to pressure Europe into joining a coalition of the willing to reopen the Strait of Hormuz. That was according to the Financial Times today, so that's what they're alleging. We've also been able to hear that apparently the Secretary of State put out an interesting video today where he sat behind a school table and a blue wall and explained 13 reasons why we went into the war in Iran. I gotta be honest with y'all, folks. Shouldn't they have done this, like, before we started the war? Like, not a month and about a weekend, you know? Like, I feel like this is something that would be important to explain to everyone before a war starts, not like a month into it, you know? Like, I feel like this is kind of like, you know, a little bit backwards, sort of.
Why do they have Marco sitting there like he's been called on like in high school or something like that? He's like sitting at the student's desk or something like that, and they said, "Mr. Marco, would you please explain how this works?" And he's like, "Yes, sir." It's like, why does it look like that?
Man, it looks like he's explaining to the principal while he was skipping class. He's like, "You see, Mr. Principal, I was skipping class because Iran was about to create a nuclear bomb." Like, it's like he's about to say that. It's like, I don't know what's up with it, but I listened to it, and generally it kind of says the same stuff that we were saying on the channel, just to be entirely honest with y'all, as to why the war was actually started. So largely just echoing the same sorts of statements. Kind of a little crazy. It took them a month and like a half week to actually just say the same thing we've been saying on air, but you know, whatever. Anyways, we also were able to hear that the U.S. will be tripling the production of PAC-3 MSE missiles due to the significant amount of depletion that we've seen quite recently. And we've also been able to hear as well that there are supposed negotiations of a ceasefire for reopening the strait going on between the U.S. and Iran, but I'm a little bit doubtful that that's happening or if it's making any progress at all. The U.S. has also been negotiating with the Kingdom of Denmark, apparently, after we threatened to invade Greenland a little while ago and kind of soured our relations with them. We're now actually negotiating with them to see if we can somehow build more bases onto the island of Greenland for U.S. forces to be based out of. So I don't know how those negotiations are going to be going, to be entirely frank with you all, but we'll find out, I'm sure. Moving us on out of that, it's now time for us, folks, to move on into a little bit of more news. Some very interesting news that's been coming out of Europe today. And getting us right on into that news, it appears that Lukashenko stated today that Belarus is preparing for war and there can be no peacetime. I don't know why he's saying that like that's a choice, you know? It's like, you know, it's kind of they're the ones who are kind of largely creating the situation that would start a war. But apparently, according to Lukashenko, Belarus is getting ready for a war. And a war with who? A war with who, you know? I mean, that would be a little bit of an interesting question right there, folks. Is it against Ukraine or is it against NATO? Because they could go for either one. I would promise y'all they're not going to be going for NATO. So are they going for Ukraine or are they not? Matthew, what are people thinking about that right now? And what are you thinking about that as well?
All right, so Lukashenko, he's back out again, and he's making some crazy statements, saying that he's preparing for war. There can be no peacetime, and there's going to be no peace. That's what Belarus is saying right now. So a little bit crazy for Belarus to come out of the blue and say something like that. So, you know, really, here's the real question. What is Putin putting him up to? That's the real question, because we know Lukashenko is not his own man. He's a puppet. So who is the likely target? 47% said Ukraine is the target, while 24% said nobody's a target. It's bogus. And 23% said NATO is the target. So I would say that if there's going to be any escalations, I would imagine it's probably going to be directed at the Baltics. That's my guess. And of course, right now, NATO is in a bit of a questionable territory when it comes to the cohesiveness of the alliance. So it could be that Belarus is trying to see what they're going to get in a response from NATO about this escalation they're trying to propose right here. They might be testing to see what NATO's diplomatic response is going to be by saying this. So I have a feeling I'm with the 22%. I think NATO could be the target, but I'm not really too much worried about it because Belarus really can't do much because, of course, you know, it's not Russia per se, it's Belarus. Belarus is basically a conduit state for Russia. So I think it's just testing the diplomatic waters for the most part. But Enforcer, what say you?
I would say that I think it's just bogus statements. I mean, the Belarusians have made statements like this in the past, and I just generally don't think that it means much of anything. They're definitely not going to join the war with Ukraine. Belarus's military is largely structured as a support force for Russian expeditionary operations in their country. They really don't have the independent capability to wage war outside of their borders, and even inside of their borders, their military is more so constructed as a logistics force and a paramilitary force than it is one that could actually engage in open warfare with another country. So I'd have to be entirely frank with y'all. I think this is just bogus, and I think this is just a statement by the Belarusian president generally for the hell of it. So I hope that does address that the best I can, at least in my opinion. And I have to say,
you said for the halibut?
Yeah, for the halibut. It's a good fish. Like it's a great,
it's a good thing.
It's a great season for him, you know.
It's bad enough that Lukashenko's doing it for the Putin. It's worse that he's doing it for the halibut.
I mean, have you seen the fish? It's a great fish, the halibut.
Oh, wow, look at that. It's like a prehistoric thing. I've never actually seen a halibut. That's actually kind of wild.
It's basically a flounder, you know, like in other words, a halibut's a flounder.
we have a lot of those. We have a lot of those that are around these days. A lot of flounders. I tell you what, those flounders, I tell you.
Man, a lot of floundering, like you know, a lot of that too. But I have to address something in the chat that's been I've seen a couple of people bring up, and I've got to say this because some people I think are just getting a little bit too far ahead of themselves here saying this kind of stuff. People have been saying that we've been clearly going our way here on this channel tonight to completely lie about the president and say that he doesn't have a plan because he said in his address today that he doesn't have a plan. Let me tell you all why I'm saying that off of some common sense here really quickly, instead of people just always acting like the guy's a 4D chess player. So whether or not we're going to do something to the Strait of Hormuz, you generally announce that sort of a thing in a broader stroke if you're going to do something about it. Like, for example, when the Iraqis invaded Kuwait, you didn't hear George H.W. Bush go, we're going to invade Jordan. They stated, if the Iraqis don't withdraw from Kuwait, we're going to crush the Iraqi army, and we're going to push the Iraqis out of Kuwait. That was the direct statement, and that was followed through on immediately. In 2003, when George Bush said Saddam Hussein had 24 hours to leave Baghdad and to give up power inside the country, he gave him 24 hours to leave Baghdad, and then once he didn't leave, we invaded Iraq. Generally, when you have a plan, you state either they're going to open it or we're going to force it open. Because beyond that, you're not really keeping them in the dark by going, you know, we're going to do something or we're going to do nothing. It's honestly just, you know, the normal thing historically that if you have a plan and you're actually going to follow through with it, you say either you open it or we're going to open it. And there's going to be really nothing you can do to stop us at that point. Now, so I just wanted to make that a little bit clear, because if you say on a nationalized address that it's just going to open naturally and you don't have a plan, you don't have a plan. That's just how it works. And also, according to our news coverage here, we take government statements largely at face value, unless we have endless proof to show that we don't have a reason to take a government statement at face value. So we take statements at face value. If you don't like it, that's unfortunate for you, but that's how this channel has worked for 4 years. Moving us on from that, though, it is time for us to get on into some other news of the situation around the world, as we have been able to hear that the Republic of the Philippines has announced that they will be out of oil within weeks, according to a statement by Reuters that was given to them by the Filipino government. We've also been able to hear that Romania is additionally in a similar situation, to where they are stating that their fuel stocks are running dangerously low and they may not be able to continue their consumption at the moment at normal levels, and they will most likely have to start some sort of rationing to some extent. So that's what we're understanding inside of Romania and the Philippines at the moment, which is once again showing that the fuel crisis is spreading and it's still becoming a significant issue. We've also been able to hear, speaking of which, inside of Russia, and getting us right back to our Twitter, as this has actually happened live on air, out in the far reaches of Russia, near to the foothills of the Urals, we were able to hear today that apparently the refinery at Ufa has been directly hit and has suffered some pretty decent damage. We were able to see that smoke was rising from the area of the Ufa refinery in this picture here, and this video actually gives us a closer look at that damage that was caused to the Ufa refinery. Let's take a little look.
Was I was in big trouble.
Looks like that's a little bit of a issue. A little bit of a small issue. I gotta tell y'all, folks, I don't know why Google Earth is doing this these days, where I zoom in and it doesn't in these block sorts of deals. It's driving me crazy. Like, I cannot stand this. But let me try and see if I can show y'all this refinery right here. There it is. And this is the refinery complex that was hit. It's one of the bigger ones in Russia, and it does appear that the Russians have taken a big Ufa at the city of Ufa along the Belaya River, because the Russians do be belaying a whole lot these days, I tell you that. But moving us on out of that news of that attack, we also got to see that over the course of the day, the Ukrainians were conducting significant drone attacks throughout the entirety of the country, and we're still waiting for further reports on what exactly they were hitting within those areas over the course of the day. Additionally, we have also been able to hear that further on down in Crimea, there were major attacks that were conducted over the day, and while we haven't been able to get any video and picture evidence of the direct impacts yet, there were reports that major power outages have already occurred within the Crimean area, and some areas extending all the way up till Melitopol. So it does appear that critical energy infrastructure within the Crimean Peninsula has been hit by the Ukrainian armed forces, which will be largely seeing an effect on the Russian Federation's armed forces within that area of a slight slowing of readiness, and also possibly a lack of internet connection due to the fact that the power has been knocked out and they may not be able to run their terminals to be able to connect to the larger internet within the area. Once again, leading to a slower response time for the Russian armed forces at this point in the conflict. We have also been able to see some additional news that's been coming out of the region as well, as the Ukrainian armed forces have been doing some pretty crazy actions over the course of the day, and the Russian casualty report has been quite significant. Oh! 2 Bobcats!
Oh, they got 2 Bobcats right there. Look at that. 2 of them. 1, 2.
And according to Miss Dees to keep the records, 2,069 drones and 219 supply trucks and and fuel tanks both rate as the 12th highest daily loss, and categories are about the recent averages. And over the course of the past 24 hours, we were able to see that 1,060 Russian soldiers were wounded and killed, along with 3 APCs, 219 supply trucks, 2 main battle tanks, 59 artillery pieces, 2,069 drones, 3 MLRSs, and 2 Bobcat skid steers. So all in all, a pretty decent day, all considered, and it does appear to show us that, at least for right now, the Russian Federation is still seeing an incredibly difficult time on the front lines. A lot of people have been talking about that ongoing fuel shortage around the world right now, but we'll hopefully be getting to that here incredibly soon once again and talking to you all about it. But moving on from that, we also got this clip from inside of Ukraine showing us the 66 mechanized brigades, unmanned ground vehicles, conducting a little bit of an ankle breaker onto a Russian FPV drone today. And take a look at this, folks. This is actually a pretty impressive one. So the Russian drone was coming in to try and hit the Ukrainian UGV, and the UGV literally just skirted around the drone at the last minute, avoiding destruction and actually carrying on its way. You can see it right there, unscathed, crazily enough, and heading on out. I'm not gonna lie, folks. That was actually a pretty crazy move right there. They literally juked out that little Russian FPV drone literally at the last second.
That was impressive the way they did that. It's like the Ukrainians like kind of know what they're doing at drone warfare or something.
It kind of does seem like that. Also, Matthew, did we have a poll on the fuel shortage issue today in like Romania and the Philippines?
Nah, I decided not to run that one. I was going to run a different
dude.
one. I'm currently typing it up.
I'm not gonna lie, dude. You had me in a sweat right now because I heard you tell me about that poll before the show, and I was waiting for it to go up at some point, and I was like trying to stall the way for it to pop up. But
yes, I wrote the poll. Here's what I do every single night, folks. Like I write a whole bunch of polls and I have them ready to go. And depending on what topics come up at the right times, I'll go grab it and I'll put it in the poll system to run it. But the catch is this though: sometimes I don't use them all because I was thinking about it because I was going to run a poll about the Romania fuel shortage. But in reality, though, it's like I don't really know what the question was really going to be. It's like, is it going to spread? I've already asked that question yesterday for the most part. So there's really no question to ask. That's why I pretty much let that one go.
yeah, so apparently I was stalling for naught because I was stalling this entire time, folks, and trying to go as slow as I could, waiting for a poll to pop up that was never going to pop up. Like, so, what a tragedy, honestly. But moving us on down the line, we haven't really been able to get a lot of footage today from Ukraine, unfortunately, folks. I try my best to try and sleuth around and get the good footage of what's going on. But I hate to tell y'all, folks, there's just not a lot of footage that's coming out again from Ukraine because now the front lines are kind of solidifying a little bit again right now. The Ukrainians aren't pushing the Russians back every single day, and so the front lines are returning back to the usual kind of drone warfare that we see each and every day with drone-on-drone interceptions, FPV drones striking Russian forces. And generally, even at that, not really a whole lot of footage is coming out. So I try to get the most clips and the best clips that I can to show you what's going on. But generally, the front line was a little bit quieter today in Ukraine. But to give you all an overview on the front-to-front situation or the battle-to-battle situation, the Ukrainians still have the massive upper hand in Kupiansk right now and are generally flogging the Russians up near Sinkivka. They do not stand a chance at this point of ever even approaching Kupiansk at this point. We've also been able to see that within the General Svatove front, the Russians are at an absolute dead stalemate, and they're not really making any advances at all, and they're still taking some decent losses within that area. In the Crimea forest, it's the same picture. The Russians are making no advances, and they're taking pretty decent losses. And we've also seen that the Seversk front, which is kind of a sub-front of the larger Severonsky forest area, has also seen no advances by the Russians today as well. We did get to see, however, near to the city of Slovyansk, that the 81st Air Mobile Brigade was conducting in-air drone interceptions against Russian drones operating near to the city, which we could see in these clips right here. We see it on the hunt for a Russian drone, and we can see they have found one right there, and it's now going to line up to try and take it out. It looks like a cheaper reconnaissance drone of the Russians, and it is, as a matter of fact. And so the Ukrainians are going to try and take it down before it can gather any vital data to provide back to the Russians for them to coordinate artillery strikes on the Ukrainians. And there went that drone. Pretty impressive hit right there, and also eagle-eyed to be able to even see that thing out there in the wild blue yonder for the larger part. Down on the Konstantinivka front, the fighting has been quite heavy. The Russians have been attempting to advance out of Chasiv Yar for about 2 years now with no real success. The Ukrainians still hold on to about 15 to 20% of Chasiv Yar, and the Russians haven't been able to push them out yet. It's been almost 2 years, so we're not expecting the northern flank of Konstantinivka to fall anytime soon, given the current trends. Right now in the fields, to the east of Konstantinivka, the Russian Federation is fighting heavily to try and push forward, and we haven't really been able to see that that's been producing any positive results. If there are any advances, they're so slow, they're impossible to measure, and also the Russians have been taking decent losses in the Konstantinivka front at large. On the Dobropilia front, that front has almost gone completely quiet. It seems that the Russians are once again trying to divert most of their efforts to eventually taking Pokrovsk, which is held out exceptionally well at the moment, and of course the fighting as usual has been quite heavy in Pokrovsk, with significant emphasis being seen on the Pokrovsk to Udachny front, which is the southern flank of the battle. Here the Russians are attempting to try and control this railway berm that actually exists just south of the city, because everything always becomes related to the railways. And this railway berm here is actually a pretty significant one, as it's tree-lined quite a lot on both sides, and the berm in the middle that's created by the fill that the railroad rests on also serves as a decent break of sight for the Russians, meaning that's a pretty good defensive position and basing location to try and start pushes into the fields deeper on and further west to the area of Pokrovsk. The Russians have not ever been able to pass over this railway berm at the moment, and the fighting is still incredibly heavy near to the towns of Kutline and Udachny, which are along the railway berm. The Russians have seemed to see that there is a possible weak spot in Udachny, considering that it's a semi-urban area, generally a smaller town. They have been able to try and advance over the railway berm a couple of times, but it seems that they're repulsed most times than not, and for that reason they have been able to get a good foothold on the northern side of Udachny to try their push for the larger power plant, which y'all can see right up here, which is just north of the city of Udachny. We've also been able to see, moving us further on down from that front, as we sadly have no footage, that in the greater Battle of the Plains, near to the area of Velika Novosilka, the Russians have also been making no advances. This is actually one of the areas they were pushed back the heaviest over about the past month, and it seems that they still do not have the initiative in this area or have even been able to stabilize their front, and the Ukrainians are still pushing them slowly back, day by day, towards the Velika Novosilka. But that progress right now is, of course, incredibly slow, and doesn't really appear to be seeing that Velika Novosilka will be directly threatened by Ukrainian capture at any point here in the near future. But they will be getting a lot closer to it. We've also seen that along the entirety of the southern front, throughout the plains, that there hasn't been a lot of progress at this point throughout most of the region by either side. It's almost returned back to the stalemate that it once was, but it returned back to a stalemate after the Ukrainians were able to claim about 800 square kilometers of ground in the counteroffensives that they conducted recently, which is a fairly positive way to see that the front line returns to some sort of a stabilized level. Is that, of course, the Ukrainians took back a lot of ground before it returned back to a stabilized stalemate. We've also been able to see that the Ukrainians were hitting Russian forces down here with AASM hammers dropped off the bottom of one of their MiG-29s. We can actually see the Russians right there moving around the vehicle that they've stopped near to a small tree line, and in a second they're about to hit them with the AASM hammers. These are French provided.
Give them the hammer, I tell you what. Give them the hammer. Not that bendy type that you get from China, but those expensive hammers, the ones that you get from American defense companies.
Oh, and look at that. They're actually just a little bit north of the Surovikin line. Crazy, right?
That is crazy right there. Oh.
Wow. Well, there they go. I gotta tell you, those hammers are something else.
It's almost like it's a hammer.
Almost like it is, honestly.
Also, by the way, is this true? Someone in the chat said, let's see here. They said they're diagnosing a toilet malfunction right now on the spaceship that took off heading for the moon. Is that true?
Is it? I don't know. I actually wouldn't know.
Let's see, toilet malfunction, Artemis. Let's see here. Let's see if this is true real quick. I'm curious. So apparently it is true. It says the only toilet in Artemis 2 is currently malfunctioning, dealing with a broken toilet. That's the claim, at least. Not really totally sure what's going on with that there, but apparently they're claiming that the toilet's broken.
Huh. Well, they do have other ways of disposing of liquid and solid waste, so there is a backup to that, from what I would know. NASA usually has a backup to a situation like that because, that'd kind of be not great if they didn't. So hopefully they'll be able to fix that, and if they don't, the mission will still go forward. It's just that they will be dealing with a little bit less than an ideal sort of a waste situation, unfortunately. But moving us on from that and into the area of Kherson, we also were able to see that the Ukrainians were hitting Russian forces across the Dnipro today, which generally doesn't produce anything as far as grander strategy. It's really just trying to inflict losses on the Russians because the Russians can't cross the river, neither can the Ukrainians, so the Ukrainians just fly a couple of drones over the river every once in a while to take out a couple of Russians and to increase the loss report every day for their side, which is honestly not bad. I mean, it could be worse. They could just sit around and do nothing, which strategically wouldn't be the greatest move.
Also, by the way, is it lightning outside of your place right now?
I don't think so. I keep all my blinds closed, so I don't really get to see much. I kind of hatches closed in here.
I'm seeing a whole bunch of bright flashes of light, and I'm not hearing thunder. So I'm like, I don't know what's going on outside. It's like the flashes from something outside. So who knows? It's filling up the whole window.
Huh. That's really interesting. You know, we ought to go check Flight Radar 24. Like, we ought to go check that here in a minute. Let's go see what's going on Flight Radar right now. Hopefully it didn't boot me out where I have to log back in. Because I haven't used this in a hot minute, folks. We just haven't really needed to look at Flight Radar 24 a whole lot recently. So, what do we got going on over Salt Lake right now?
Oh yeah, it's lightning. I just checked. Oh yeah, it's definitely lightning. Apparently it's right over my head. So yeah, it's lightning.
The first thunderstorm in Utah? Dude, we've been here for like 6 months almost, and it's the first thunderstorm I think either of us have ever heard of or seen of out here.
Yeah, how's it lightning outside when there's a freeze warning out? There's a thunderstorm and there's a freeze warning out. It's like I didn't think that was the thing.
You know, I'm not gonna lie, I don't think that was a thing either. Like that's fairly interesting, honestly. I don't know what to make of that. And let's see here. Oh, dang, man, tomorrow it's gonna be nice, dude. It's gonna be like in the 40s. I'm not gonna lie, folks. I love it when the weather's in like the 50s and the 60s. That's honestly probably like the best temperatures in the world, is any temperatures that are in the 40s and the 50s degrees Fahrenheit, that is. For all of you folks in Europe, I think that'd be around 15 to 20 degrees Celsius, if I'm not mistaken. But moving us on out of that, it is time for us to move on out of the front lines to Ukraine, as that was our general frontline overview. And I hope that was a little bit more of a detailed one today of what's going on front to front. I know a lot of people have, you know, I saw someone in the chat earlier who's been watching the channel for a while. They're like, oh, I guess y'all don't cover Ukraine war news anymore. It's like, no, we do, and we try and cover it as much as we can. And I follow the situation as religiously as I did at the start of the war. It's just that, sadly, folks, we just don't get to cover it as much as we'd like to, because there's so many things going on in the world every day, and we kind of have to prioritize the biggest happenings in the day over all of the others. And while Ukraine's still a big happening every day, and it's the largest war that's really ever happened in the century, even still, you know, there's only so much time that we can give it, and on top of that, there's not really a lot of video or pictures that are coming out these days for us to kind of break down. But anyways, with that, it is time for us to move on into Kyiv and cover the speech from the president of Ukraine, President Volodymyr Zelensky, on this day of 1498 of the war. And so, without further ado, here is the speech. Peach! Peach! О, окей.
Бажаю здоров'я. Коротко про цей день. Фактично всю добу наші воїни збивають російські безпілотники. Повітряні тривоги були у більшості регіонів. Більш ніж 700 російських дронів. Значна частина з них шахеди. Відсоток збиття за цю добу доволі високий, близько 90%, але звісно, потрібно вище. На жаль, були влучання, зокрема у Волинській області, у Закарпатській області, на Тернопільщині, в Чернівецькій області, в Черкаській області, на Франківщині, також в інших регіонах. Всюди, де потрібно, тривають відновлювальні роботи. Серед основних мішеней для росіян знов енергетика. У Луцьку були пошкоджені також продовольчі склади, термінал Нової пошти. На Полтавщині, в інших областях є пошкодження житлових будинків. Фактично, це відповідь росіян на нашу пропозицію припинення вогню на Великодні свята. Україна відкрито зробила таку пропозицію Росії. Росія відповідає шахедами і продовжує свої терористичні операції проти нашої енергетики, проти нашої інфраструктури. Я говорив сьогодні з американською командою, зокрема, про це. Потрібні інші сигнали, і тиша на Великдень могла би бути саме тим сигналом, який всім скаже, дипломатія може бути успішною. Україна робить все, щоб підтримати роботу заради миру. Сьогодні ми детально говорили зі Стівом Віткофом, Джаредом Кушнером, долучились Лінсі Грем та Марк Рютте. Ми говорили про те, як зміцнити дипломатію, які кроки можливі, також про гарантії безпеки та про залучення європейців. Була позитивна розмова. Я хочу подякувати Стіву, Джареду, Лінсі, Марку. Ми домовились посилити гарантії безпеки. Я вже доручив нашій команді дати оперативне оновлення в документи, щоб гарантії безпеки для України були сильними і щоб перспектива відбудови після війни була реальною та щоб все було працездатним. Все має бути актуальним. Ми бачимо, які зміни в світі, як багато може змінити за один момент. Це стосується і альянсів, і безпекових викликів. Україна має отримати надійну безпеку, і це головне завдання. Я вдячний, що представники президента Сполучених Штатів чують нас і готові працювати разом, щоб знайти правильні компроміси, правильні кроки, правильні рішення. Ключ у тому, як і про що ми всі разом говоримо з Росією, та у тому, як підготовлені документи, зокрема про гарантії безпеки, щоб українці чітко розуміли, як партнери будуть реагувати у випадку повторення російської агресії. І що, власне, буде стримувати Росію від агресії. Потрібні спільні сильні позиції, і наш український внесок в цю силу точно є. З Америкою ми працюємо. Дякую усім, хто нам допомагає. Я розраховую, що команди попрацюють найближчим часом предметно, щоб ми всі могли відчути прогрес. Тристоронній формат важливий, лідерський формат – все це дуже потрібно. Ще одне важливо, що Рустем Умєров продовжує зараз працювати з країнами, які зацікавлені в нашій українській експертизі для захисту. Ми готуємо довгострокові угоди. Саме довгострокова співпраця завжди найкраще дає результати. Вже є домовленості з Саудівською Аравією, Еміратами, Катаром. Ми працюємо з Іорданією. Ми в комунікації з Кувейтом, вже з Іраком та Бахрейном. І також вже є вагома зацікавленість Туреччини та деяких інших країн з-поза меж Близького Сходу, зацікавленість в нашій українській силі. І ми обов'язково підтримуємо тих, хто підтримує нас. Ми готові працювати з тими, хто поважає нас, поважає Україну, поважає українців та готовий на десятиліття будувати реальну співпрацю. Це те, що дасть Україні впевненість. Це те, що дасть нашим партнерам безпеку. Будуть домовленості також з нашими партнерами в Європі. Я вже говорив про це з багатьма. Сьогодні говорив з прем'єр-міністром Норвегії. Дякую, Йонасе, хороша розмова. Сьогодні була розмова з прем'єр-міністром Британії. Ми готуємо нові сильні речі. Дякую, Кіре. Дякую всім, хто з нами, хто з Україною. Слава Україні!
Slava Ukraine! Slava Ukraine! Slava Ukraine!
I'm not gonna lie, he did that like really quickly. It caught me off guard. He always does that so fast. I'm like, what the hell? Like, I was ready and everything. I was like, oh my god, he just finished that. Wow, that's
Heroes
crazy.
Slava!
Slava Ukraini, Rom Slava, Ukrainsky, Ukrainki.
But with that, that is the end of the speech from the President of Ukraine, Volodymyr Zelensky, here on this day of 1,498 of the war. And with that in mind, folks, it's time for us to move on and into the second segment of the stream, to where we get to talk to each and every single one of y'all. And we get to talk to everyone who threw in a super chat, and hopefully as many people as we can who threw in live chats, because this channel ain't a pay-to-play, folks. You do not have to send in a super chat to have your question answered. And that's something that a lot of people sometimes wouldn't know, because we get so many super chats these days. It's very hard to get the live chats, but you do not have to pay to have a question answered here on the show. We try and make the thing as free to play as we possibly can. There are no ads or sponsors on our streams, and also you do not have to pay a super chat to have a question answered. We like to stand on business here, not on money. We do not have a board of shareholders, so we do not have to maximize profits at every turn, which I think is a very good thing. But nevertheless, folks, it is time for us to move on and into, and it definitely is thundering out there. I can hear it now. Like, I just heard it right there. But it is time for us to move on into the questions for the night. And
oh, wow. It's hailing.
Really?
Yeah, I hear like little taps of like ice on the window right now. Like, that does not sound like rain. It sounds like, that sounds like something solid.
Huh. Something solid. Are you sure it's not the shit from the Artemis craft? Like above us, like maybe it's that. You know, they might just be like dropping some chocolate rain on us right now. Maybe, you know, you don't know.
I think it would float at this point. I don't think it would come down.
You know, what if, man? What if, like, they, like, jettisoned the solid waste and it re-entered the atmosphere and just started to burn up, and some kid looked up and went, "Look, Mom, a shooting star!" It's like, that ain't no shooting star. Like, it's like, that's something else. But anyways, with that, it is time for us to move on into the question segment. And also, we have one last poll to discuss with you all here really quickly. And so, Matthew, what are people thinking about that poll, and what are you thinking about it as well?
Let's see here. Hold on a second. Let me get it pulled up, actually, because YouTube's having a problem. They caught me lacking, folks. Or I caught YouTube lacking, one and the other.
Driving around and acting silly. I don't care no more. Man, have you seen that meme?
Yeah. No, I
Oh
haven't
man.
personally, but it looks like YouTube just loaded in. So here's the poll. It says, what immediate effect would likely be caused by the U.S. withdrawing from NATO, hypothetically speaking? 49% said Russia would likely invade the Baltics, while 24% said there would be no change whatsoever. It would remain status quo. And 17% said France would take over. There would be no issue pretty much at all. And the immediate effect of withdrawing from NATO, first of all, he can't do that, number one. If he tried to do it, that would be violating the act that was passed by Congress. So, there would be a quick injunction, just like we saw with the ballroom, and there would be a little bit of a period of thinking it over and sitting in the timeout chair to see whether or not it's legal or not. He's not going to leave NATO. It's a lot of bluster. And also, NATO is not a paper tiger. That's an absolutely insane statement to say, like to say that NATO is a paper tiger. It literally consists of the most powerful military forces on the planet, including the United States. So to call NATO a paper tiger is calling the United States a paper tiger, which is crazy, to say the least. So I would say if NATO were to lose the United States tomorrow, it would probably be simply France would take over for the most part as the lead NATO country, because they've already shown an initiative to do that. And there would really be no issue from it, because you got to remember that there's still nukes. Like France is nuclear armed, and also there's other nuclear armed countries as well outside of the United States. So unless Russia's ready for a possible nuclear war with France, then I'm sure they would probably still think twice. But it would obviously be pretty damning for the United States to leave NATO, especially since we're the ones that basically started it for the most part. But Enforcer, what say you?
Also, it keeps all of the major military powers in the world that isn't China in our military alliance with us, which would be kind of stupid for us to leave that, considering that we basically made the cool kids club for all of the cool kids in the world, and we put them all in it, and we asked them to get in, and they joined us, and then we're just going to hop out of it and leave. It's like, I don't really get what the point of that would be. It's not going to happen, like, I can tell you all that, because here's the issue, folks. If that was attempted, the courts are going to shoot that down, highly likely, especially if the Congress actually gets a spine at all and gets heavily involved and says, no, that's a violation of a congressional act that was passed and signed by the president and also the Congress, so that's completely unlawful, and they shoot it down. And also, by the way, folks, that might bring up some, if that started to become a little bit of a heavy spat, and then the president just kind of overlooked the court's decision, I gotta bring this up. That technically would start to get into impeachment grounds, possibly, but
it wouldn't come to that.
It wouldn't come to that
because I mean, he's got other options. If he's trying to sabotage NATO and try to basically quiet quit, he can do that. Like he doesn't necessarily have to leave NATO. Like on paper, he can basically quit it without actually quitting it. Like for example, he can simply refuse to sell weapons to these countries that are in NATO. That's effectively leaving it to a certain degree. He can also refuse to uphold NATO Article 5 and technically say that the United States is choosing to voluntarily bow out. He could do that as well. So I mean, technically speaking, he can just leave it because it's prohibited by the NDAA that was passed in 2024. But there are other ways that he could try to get around that if he wanted to. It would obviously be bad faith, in my personal opinion, to do that. But I mean, it technically wouldn't be illegal at that point.
Yeah, I would have to say that that's true as well. But I would have to also add folks to the poll side of things. If we left NATO, it would most likely not really change all too much. France and Germany specifically, and also Poland as well, have been massively ramping up arms production in their countries, and all that would change is that they would start ramping up arms production even further. Because a lot of people don't know this in America, and I find this just to be due to sheer ignorance, because nobody really likes to read in this country, but France, Germany, Italy, the United Kingdom, Spain, they can all get by on their own. And while they do buy American weapons, they can easily go without buying American weapons and generally make their own stuff. They already do. Like, people don't know this about France and Germany, but the amount of U.S. equipment that's in the French and German military today, outside of the Browning 50 caliber, is almost non-existent. They basically use nothing but equipment that is built in-house. That's not even to speak of the Polish, which basically have their own arms industry going at this point, and the Swedes, which, much like the French, build everything of theirs in-house. So if they didn't want, like if a European country didn't want to go with the bougie, expensive French options for military equipment, they would then go with the cheaper Swedish options for military equipment that are also very capable and quite competent, but they're more budget friendly, like the Gripens and other military equipment that the Swedes produce. So in reality, there's not really anything conventionally that the Europeans would be found lacking for if the United States just packed up and left. And not only that, the other factor is that Britain and France are nuclear armed, and that means that even if the United States leaves, the NATO alliance still has a nuclear umbrella over it because of the British and the French. And then the British and the French can just take up where the Americans left off and provide their nuclear umbrella to all of the countries of NATO to ensure that that sort of a nuclear protection continues to persist, even without the United States being present in the NATO alliance. So to be entirely honest with y'all, that's kind of like shooting ourselves in the foot or cutting off our nose to spite our face, because it doesn't really do a lot to screw over Europe strategically. It's just that the U.S. is out of the picture, and it really doesn't do a lot to really help us out at all, because if we leave NATO, you know what all these countries are going to do? They're going to say, okay, well, the U.S. military is going to have to pack up and leave now because you're not a part of NATO, and that's the only reason that you were here, and that means that the U.S. military is going to have to leave. And then that also begs the question, how do we get to the Middle East? Because the British control the IRGC, which is the only other way that we can fly aircraft into the Middle East, because they have to stop and refuel either in Europe or at the IRGC. And so at that point, not only did we lose the entirety of NATO by leaving, we also lost our entire sphere of influence in the Middle East, because we can't power project there anymore efficiently or reliably. So that would be a pretty stupid idea to ever try and leave NATO, because we're basically screwing our entire global sphere of influence over with one swift move. So for that reason, it wouldn't happen. That would be my honest assessment. So with that, I hope that does address that the best I can, at least in my opinion. And with that, we are on and into the questions. And Matthew, what do we got?
All right, so jumping into our questions here, and also for everybody asking, we currently are fresh out of breaking news right now. There is generally a quiet time. It's quiet hours right now. So we did see that earlier Iran had launched attacks on Gulf states. They'd also launched a pretty large ballistic missile attack on Israel as well. But for right now, though, it looks like it's generally gone quiet. So I think for now, we are okay. But if something does happen, we will let you know when it does break out. But jumping into our first super chat of the last segment, this one's going to go to Carta Fla. And thank you very much, Carta, for that $119 support. And we appreciate that. Very generous support. Very, very much. And by the way, that is the largest super chat of the night at this point. And Carta said, I am from Iceland, and I can't say much, but I applied to the Ukraine Army through Telegram a year ago, and I have now been there for about 7 months fighting. And thank you for all you do, and regards, Edvard.
And I gotta say, a humongous thanks for you for the unbelievably massive support, Carterflaw. And I also gotta say, that's really crazy to hear that you've been fighting in Ukraine as a foreign member of the Ukrainian Armed Forces. I hope that that's been going well and that you've been safe out there. And I also have to say, a humongous thanks to you for really enjoying the show. We actually have someone very much like you that watches this show. Sivdiv actually watches this show. He doesn't usually chat in the live chat a whole lot, but he's here pretty commonly, as a matter of fact, and actually enjoys the channel, much like yourself. So I guess you and him are in very similar shoes, because he himself has also volunteered and served in the Ukrainian Armed Forces as well. And I got to say, a humongous thanks to you for the incredibly kind words, Carterflaw, and I hope that things continue to go well and that you stay safe out there on the front lines and continue to see that the good fight is fought, because it takes folks like you who are willing to put that sort of a thing under their belts and really take it on at the horns that help to ensure that the Russian Federation doesn't push further westwards. And I also got to say that your home country is really cool too. I've always wanted to go to Iceland. It's such a cool place. Have y'all seen it, folks? Have y'all seen Iceland? I mean, take a look at this. This is Reykjavik.
You know, every time I hear someone like Carter Floss saying, I'm from Iceland, it reminds me of the mix-up between Iceland and Greenland. Greenland is really Iceland, and Iceland is really Greenland, because the Green Island is Iceland. That's where the greenery is at. The Greenland is the ice country. The whole thing is full of ice. Like, you can see that from the satellite view as well. So, you know, there was a big mix-up a while back here in the United States about which one was the United States really talking about possibly taking. And I think they got mixed up. I think they might have got a little mixed up. But yeah, Iceland's the real green one. Oh, look at that water, by the way.
This is strange. A thermal spring.
It's like the water in the, what's they call that? The Utah Lake.
Yeah, it kind of is, isn't it? This is actually a little thermal lake right here, and it's a spa resort, because the thermal waters have certain kinds of I believe it's minerals inside of it that they say is healthy for the skin, and so people come out here and they get in the warm waters. This is a warm water thermal spring, and they enjoy them. I mean, it's a really cool place, honestly. And also, they have this humongous cathedral with this really wild design. I forgot what denomination's church this is, because they have quite a varying amount inside of Reykjavik, because it's a seafaring nation, and generally they have a small church or a cathedral or other place of worship, even synagogues, I believe, for multiple different types of worship. Because back in the day, in the seafaring age, whenever sailors would be on shore leave here, they would go to services at their local churches, cathedrals, synagogues, and so on here in Reykjavik. So a little bit of an interesting fact about that. Most seafaring cities historically are like that. But I gotta say, I really love Iceland. Iceland is a really cool country. And let me show you all some more of the pictures from around the island instead of them all being from Reykjavik. Take a look at this. I mean, just a crazy place. Almost looks like a fictional land, like something you'd see in a fairy tale, really. And it's a real place. I mean, that's the craziest thing about it, honestly.
It is really wild. I will say it's very, very nice looking. I will say it looked a lot more appealing though when we lived in Alabama than it does now. Not trying to crap on Iceland, by the way. It's a beautiful country, but yeah, Utah has something that comes close to it in its own right. So we get to experience natural beauty of the surroundings daily now, which is a huge privilege, by the way. Because Alabama had forests, it had some rolling hills here and there, but it didn't have anything quite like Utah has or like Iceland has or something like that. Then natural beauty out west is just simply unmatched for the most part. So we get to see this kind of stuff. It's really impressive.
Let me show y'all something interesting today, because today we actually went to a store that revolved around some hiking and stuff, and I got a hiking guidebook for trails around Salt Lake and the whole state of Utah, and one of them showed this lake right here called Lake Blanche. I didn't know this, folks, but this is like a 30-minute drive from us and about a 2-hour hike to get up here and take a look at this, and it's a really crazy. I mean, look at the views. I mean, like, this is absolutely crazy right here, and this is only 30 minutes from us here in the Salt Lake City, like, metropolitan area to be able to get up here and take a look at this. And I didn't know that this was here. I literally, folks, went and got the hiking guide, and I was like, oh my God, Mandy, look at all these options. These are all literally like 30 minutes from us, up in the same area around Big and Little Cottonwood Canyons. And it's just unbelievable kinds of scenery. I mean, stuff that looks like it's straight out of a painting. Like, here's another picture of one of the trails. That's actually what all the trails kind of look like on the Wasatch Front. The other ones on the other mountains, kind of towards what is it, Mount Baldy or something like that over there. Those are more so like arid kind of looking, like they're almost in the desert. But these are a lot more Rocky Mountain looking. Like, when you take a look around, you're like, wow, this really feels like the Rockies. And I got to say, folks, that the Rockies is one of my favorite places as far as the natural scenery goes, like the types of trees that they have, the exposed rocks, the steep, jagged peaks. Yeah. Like, it's really a cool look.
For a mixture of having a city, having access to this really natural beauty that you see here in the forest and stuff like that, and also the wilderness, I would say probably the best bang for your buck is Utah for the most part. Now, there are places you could go to and live cheaper. Like, for example, if you went out to the middle of nowhere, like in Utah, like, let's say outside of Bozeman, Montana, like I'm talking about way outside the city. If you're okay with living somewhat Spartan and somewhat rural, you could make it cheaper. But if you still want to have creature comforts and live near a city, I would say Utah is about as cheap as you can get and also have the access to this natural beauty right here, which is largely why we picked it for the most part, is because it was affordable. If you go to anywhere like Seattle and you try to get near that natural beauty, you're going to be paying dearly for it. Also out in California, you're going to be paying dearly for it as well. So Utah is really an underrated state I think it's because of the stereotypes, like people stereotype the state, so they kind of rule it out without seeing it, but it's really underrated.
It really is, honestly. It's just an amazing, I can't praise it enough. It really is an amazing place. Also, by the way, if you want to see another one that's pretty cool, there's this one, which is Lake Mary. And let me see if they have any, like, drop-down views that we can get of this. So this is Lake Mary right here, which you can also go to as well. This is about 1.5 miles of hiking to get out to this one. And this one's one I want to do because they said that this was an easy one, and I'm not going to lie, folks, I kind of need the easier ones. I need easy wins right now, folks. I need to get up in shape, and I'm getting there. Like, you know, I'm getting there little by little of actually getting in shape again. But this is a really beautiful place, too. Like, I got to say, folks, those mountain lakes really got something going on for them, like with the trees, the mountain peaks, the little lakes. It looks like Bob Ross paintings, like copy and pasted in slightly different variations, and I'm here for it. Like, I want to go see these because they just look great. And it's absolutely crazier, folks, that here is that Lake Blanche right here. So this is the hike that you have to take to get up to it, basically up this ridge. And then this is Salt Lake City right here. So this is literally just like 4 miles out of the city. It's basically in the city almost, which is the craziest, coolest thing about Salt Lake, is that you can get all of these almost like Yosemite style, Yellowstone style views of natural scenery pretty much in the city almost, which is the coolest thing about it. Like, we go out all the time, folks, and we wander around the mountains on the outskirts of Salt Lake. Like yesterday we went back up, well, a couple of days ago actually, we went back up to the Bear Canyon Bridge and wandered around there again. And it's just crazy because you can see the city, but it's basically like you're in the middle of the wilderness nearly on these trails. It's just the neatest thing, honestly. But anyway,
it's just the downside is the rattlers. Like, the rattlers come out when it gets hot, obviously, because if it gets above 80 degrees, they're obviously cold-blooded reptiles, so they want to come out and get the heat from the sun, so they go hang out near the trails and stuff like that. Out here, I think it's the Great Basin rattlesnake they have out here. I think those are a lot less aggressive than the ones that were generally in the South for the most part. So, you know, it's a thing too. But at the same time, it seems like people out here are not really fond of taking out the rattlesnakes for the most part. In Alabama, it was common. Like, if you saw a rattlesnake, it was toast. If you saw a rattlesnake, it was over with for that thing. Out here, it seems like people generally leave them alone for the most part. So, you know, I don't know. Like, if I guess if they're not aggressive and they're minding their own business, whatever. But, you know, I'm not fond of snakes.
Coming from Alabama, we dealt with every type of snake, by the way, folks. We hate snakes with a passion. If you have a pet snake, I'm sorry, but we just hate them. Like I gotta be honest there. I'm not a big fan of snakes at all. Alabama taught us not to be. But anyways, with that, I hope that does address that the best we can. And a humongous thanks to you so much once again, Cardflaw, for that support. I hope you stay safe out there. And a big thanks to you for enjoying and watching the show and helping us to keep it on air. And so with that, we are on and into the next one.
Also, Paul said, "Can them rattlers kill you?" Most people won't die from a rattlesnake bite. Like, it'll mess you up pretty bad. Like, it's gonna cause necrosis in whatever limb you got bit in. So, which means you might possibly lose the limb depending on how long it takes you to get antivenom in your system. The main part about getting bit by a rattlesnake is merely paying for it. To be perfectly honest, the cost of antivenom is crazy. I think it's like $1,000 or more a vial or something, and you have to have several vials of antivenom to properly get it out of your system. So, the one thing that they tell people, and I actually did a lot of research on this because I had to brush up on it in case, you know, there's an accidental bite, is you always want to try to get a picture of the snake, like, if you can, like, to try to get your nerves under control. If you get bit, get a picture of the snake. Don't try to take it with you or something. That's a terrible idea. Just get a picture of the thing, so that way when you go to the hospital that has the antivenom, they'll know which one to give you, because depending on which snake you got bit by, there's different types of venom. They act a little bit different. Some of them are neurotoxins and some of them aren't neurotoxins. So you have to know which one you got bit by, or otherwise the doctor's playing a guessing game trying to give you antivenom. So, you know, it would suck to get bit by a snake, but most of them won't kill you for the most part. But anyways, moving on to the next one here. This one goes to Marion Deemert. And thank you very much, Marion, for that $50 support, and we appreciate that very, very much. Marion said, "Thank you for not forgetting about Ukraine."
And we never do. We never do. It's just that it's way later in the night that we finally get around to it. But we always keep Ukraine in the news coverage. Unless if it's something absolutely crazy, like the very start of the Iran war where we really can't get to it. We cover Ukraine every day. And we never try and forget any of the news that we cover, because one thing I'll always tell y'all folks, because we have watched the mainstream news back in the day. And this is one thing that I would hate. They would always start a story, but they'd never tell you how it ends. Don't y'all ever notice that about mainstream news? Like, they'll tell you when a new crisis starts, but they'll never tell you the conclusion to those crises that they are covering. You know, it's just like, oh my God, a Carnival Cruise Line ship is got the sewage leaking out of it, and it smells like raw shit. And then they never tell you how that ended. They just tell you about like the first 3 days of it, and then just completely drop it and move on to other stuff. And some of them might like give like 5 minutes to it at like midnight 7 days later, but they won't actually tell you most of the time how things end or how they keep going. And that's one thing we like to try and avoid on this channel, because I know a lot of people want to keep hearing about the stories they've been invested in for years, like the war in Ukraine, and we don't want to just completely, cut that off. And on top of that, it's still the largest war going on in the century, so it wouldn't make any sense not to cover it. But a huge thanks to you for the incredible support, Marion Deemer, and helping this channel to keep on running, because if it wasn't for folks like you, we wouldn't be able to keep this channel running, to keep Ukraine in our news coverage, and to keep covering everything that we do around the world these days. So a humongous thanks to you so much once again for support and helping this channel to keep on running. And with that, we're on to the next one.
Also, I see everybody in the comments. I'm like, oh man, those snakes are bad. I can't stand those snakes. Honestly, I really hate snakes. Like, I really do. Like, I despise them. I had like several close encounters when I was younger with a snake. In fact, there was a copperhead, which is it's a venomous snake, and that's in the South. They're called copperheads. I think they're also called timber rattlers, if I'm not mistaken, but I called them copperheads. They're a brown snake. They have a very distinct pattern on them, but they're venomous. And if you get bit, you're in some trouble if you get bit by one of those. There was actually one in my backyard when I was young, and I didn't see it. It was in some pretty tall grass. I actually kicked the thing, and thankfully it was apparently a chill one, and it didn't bite. But if it had bitten at that age, I'd have been in some deep trouble and for some pretty bad stuff. And also, I've stepped on baby snakes before. There was baby snakes all over the place, baby rattlers, baby rat snakes. There was a lot of snakes where we were growing up constantly. The dogs were always getting bit by snakes. In fact, our husky that we had when we were really young, it got bit by rattlesnakes. It was stupid enough to go out and try to kill those snakes. Like, it went hunting for the most venomous snakes in the woods. So it would constantly come back with a basketball snout, and we'd have to give it Benadryl, take it to the vet, and it would have to get the antivenom at the vet. I think half the time, like, it was just the Benadryl half the time. It got bit by snakes so much, it was like, we can't pay for antivenom every time this dog goes out and gets bit by a snake for the most part. But it was wild though. Like, I couldn't stand them, and I didn't make any bones about it. After it started biting the dog, I started taking the snakes out. Like, I was hunting for snakes at that point. I was getting rid of those things left and right. Like, they were getting up out of there, and eventually they go away. I think they learn that this is not a good property to come to, because if you go there, you're going to get taken out. So it was just those snakes were bad where we were at.
That dog killed everything in around that house. Like within the first 4 years of us moving to this first house that we lived in, which was in the middle of the woods near to this small town in Alabama called Wetumpka, that husky had basically killed everything that was living in the area. So there were no more raccoons, there were no more possums, the deer generally avoided the area even, there were basically no more birds. The snakes were still prevalent, though, because the snakes would best the dog a lot by biting it in the face, and it would come back to the house with its head swollen like a basketball, and then we'd have to get it down to the vet and everything, and, oh, let's give it some medicine, and never anti-venom, but just medicine. And then the dog would never learn, and it would just keep trying to hunt these snakes. And, you have every type of poisonous snake that you can imagine in Alabama, usually copperheads, and also, let's see, cottonmouths, which are also a little bit common as well in Alabama. Actually, all of the poisonous snakes are actually common in Alabama. I was about to start listing almost all of them off, and they're pretty much all in Alabama.
Yeah, the crazy part is that they would constantly cross the road, because we lived in a very rural area, so it was very wooded. It was still very wild and forested and stuff like that. So, also our neighbors were very country as well. So, big old like Raptor trucks, like the dude that lives to the right of us, he was in forestry. So he owned a forestry company. So he drove this huge Raptor. I remember hearing one day, I heard like the tires squealing and stuff. And I was like, what the hell's going on outside? So I walked outside, and then later on the road, I'm like, oh, there's a rattlesnake on the road right there. It just got skidded over, and it was cooked after that. Somebody was always skidding over a snake on the road, and you just find them like strewn all over the road somewhere or something. But you had to take them out, though, because there were so many of them. If you didn't, you were probably going to get bit by them later, because there were so many all over the place. And they hid everywhere, all around the house, all around the yard. It was dangerous.
Yeah, sometimes folks just killing one and then throwing out its body somewhere kind of a little ways away for it to rot would kind of be a bit of a deterrent to the other snakes because I would suppose they can smell the decay and they would guess that, if there's a lot of snake corpses around a place, it might be dangerous for them and they kind of avoid it for a little bit. So whenever you kill a snake, you'd always want to throw it out there and let it rot in the open. Not where you could smell it, but where the snakes could probably smell it, maybe. To be able to be like, hey, there's a lot of dead snakes around here. Maybe I want to avoid this. And also, I know some people are like, well, snakes can't smell. Apparently they can, from what I know, but they somehow smell through their tongue. And they also listen through their tongue as well. That's kind of a weird thing I really don't understand. But that's what I was told when I was growing up, and I just kind of stuck with that.
They're
So that's
heat
wrong.
seekers. They're heat seekers too. They won't strike stuff that's usually cold. They look for heat from your body for the most part. So that's how they generally know where to strike. And I don't know how they know exactly. Like, I don't know if they're like optimizing their targeting or something like that. I don't know if they're like looking for the vein or something, but they usually use heat. That's why, if you're wearing like gaiters at your ankle or something like that, the snakes will actually bite higher than the gaiter because they don't detect the heat. Where the gaiter's at on your ankle, they go higher on the leg where they can actually see heat and they'll strike higher at that point.
Yeah, that's an interesting thing about snakes. I just don't like them. I know I've seen some people in the chat. I love snakes. I don't like growing up around them and being terrified of them, and also y'all have probably never dealt with a black racer. Y'all probably just never been like wandering around out there in the middle of nowhere, and then have a snake come barreling at you at like 9 miles an hour through the grass, right at you in a beeline. Those little bastards are the scariest actually because the rattlesnakes like oh shit like if you hear it rattle. Copperheads, you just kind of see them on the ground, kind of getting close to you, and you're like, oh my god. Black racers, though, will literally just shoot at you like a rocket through tall grass.
Oh,
So you just see the grass splitting, and you hear this thing just going to town on the ground. You don't know where it really is, and you don't know what it is, but
and
it's
they make a
barreling
whip
right at you.
sound.
Yeah, those things are terrifying.
Yeah, that's like you literally hear like a sonic boom crack, like you hear bam, and you'll be like, what the hell? And then you'll see something like flying through the leaves, and you'll be like, oh, that's definitely one of those snakes right there. Definitely for sure. I don't like snakes at all. Like to me, it's like the reptiles, the snakes, like even, I mean, everybody has a visceral reaction to a snake. Like if you see a snake, like you're instantly like, oh gosh, it's a snake. Like there's very few people out there that I've seen. In fact, I've never come across anybody that's been like, oh, I like that. It's like, no snake.
Yeah, no snakes for me. I'm good. I've seen what they've done enough to dogs. And I've seen enough of what they've done to people a little bit. So I'm pretty fine with, disliking snakes with a passion, hating them really. And also I see some people saying black racers don't bother me. They're non-venomous. Yeah, they're non-venomous, but they still scare the shit out of you when they charge you because you don't know what that thing is yet because you can't really see it yet because it's usually like in tall grasses or something like that when it does that. So you just know that a snake's shooting at you from somewhere, have no clue what type, but it's coming for you, and you need to be ready because it's about to be here in seconds. But anyways, with that, I hope that does address our situation with snakes well. But that is one thing that we're kind of concerned about here in Utah is the rattlesnake situation. And also some people are like, well, rattlesnakes rattle to let you know you're getting close. Nowadays they don't. If y'all don't know, people have been killing the ones that rattle so much that they're kind of evolving to not rattle because the rattling kind of is equivalent to death. So basically the best way to describe that is it's kind of evolution almost through selective breeding in a way because we're pretty much indirectly killing any rattlesnake that rattles. So the ones that don't rattle are the ones that breed. And that means that their offspring have a higher chance of not rattling. Meaning that you might walk up on a rattlesnake and it never even rattled by the time your foot's literally right in front of its mouth. So anyways, with that, I hope that does address that little side fact somewhat well. And with that, we are on to the next one.
And our next one is going to go to none other than Fred Vreeman, who put in 850 as well. And thank you very much, Fred, for that support, and we do appreciate that. He said, we have plenty of oil and gas, and Alaska can increase our delivery by 10 times with no additional infrastructure, and Alberta can increase its delivery by 10 times by finishing the pipelines shut off back in 2020, and 5 million barrels per day in 2026, and 5 million more possibly in 2027.
Thank you for the support, Fred Freeman, and that's great, but sadly that just doesn't really fix the, general gap that we're seeing out of the Middle East because it's at that point it's really just supplanting Saudi Arabia's production because they're getting 5 million barrels out to international markets per day still. Saudi Arabia produces about 5 million more barrels, really more so 7 million. So if you get 5 million more out of Alaska and Alberta, that's just supplanting Saudi Arabia. That's not supplanting Iraq, Kuwait, Qatar, Bahrain, and the UAE's oil production, which is almost equal to or even more than Saudi Arabia's production. So it sounds good, but the problem is that there's still a shortage. And, while that's kind of scrounging up a little bit of oil to be able to try and fix the situation, it's not really fixing it much at all because it's not completely replacing the Middle East's oil production barrel for barrel. So a big thanks to you for support and helping the channel to keep on running. But the honest truth is that while that might help out a little bit, prices are still going to be rising quite heavily if this continues for months. And that's not going to completely replace the Middle East oil and make the Middle East completely pointless in global energy logistics. But a big thanks to you for support and helping this channel to keep on running. And with that, we're on to the next one.
We also have a $33 support from Hal Rose, and thank you, Hal, as well, for that generous support. He said, "Hello there, this is Hal. You know me by my 333 call sign. I had a computer failure and made my dog Zeke administrator of my new computers. Microsoft and Google are upset. He has no birth certificate, no social number, no verification."
And I gotta say, that dog getting around acting silly. Put me on that. I gotta say, a big thanks to you for support. I gotta say, I got to be honest with you. I mean, putting the dog as an administrator on a computer, that's not a bad idea. Dogs are man's best friend. You can always trust a dog with a computer. That's what I always like to say. I used to put our corgis on the computers and have them run them from time to time, Bitcoin farming and all. But humongous thanks to you for the support. And I got to say, that's a pretty good one, Hal Rose. A big thanks to you for support. And I'm guessing that's an April Fool's. That's actually a pretty good one. And so a humongous thanks to you so much once again. I hope that does address that incredibly well. And with that, we are on and into the next one.
We also have a 20 from Arar983, and thank you very much, Arar, as well, for that $20 support. And they said, "Cheers." And is this weekend go time for COD, uranium ops, and LSA?
I mean, maybe. It might be, but I have a feeling that it probably won't be happening this weekend. It'll probably happen a couple of more weekends down the road. So, probably weeks down the road from now, because I have a feeling they're going to be sitting around and waiting, and the president's going to wake up one day and say he wants to do it, and then the next day he's going to say not, and that'll go on for a couple of weeks until he makes a decision, because that's what he's done on everything else so far. So a huge thanks to you for support and helping this channel to keep running, and I hope that does address that well. And also, folks, someone just shared with me something in the chat, and I cannot believe this. It is illegal to kill, harass, or catch any species of rattlesnake in Utah because they are a protective native wildlife species, and killing them is a Class B misdemeanor in the state.
I mean, if my life's in danger, that snake better watch out. I mean, I'm not looking to hurt a rattlesnake. I'm not looking to hurt any animal. In fact, I'm not a hunter personally. We grew up in an area where everybody hunted, and I wasn't never a huge fan of it because I'm like, just let the animals, live in peace. I get the fact that they have to sort of like cull some of the deer because the whitetail population gets out of control, but there's a possibility of overhunting as well. So I mean, if you hunt, that's cool. It wasn't really my thing, but at the same time, though, if I'm threatened by an animal, it's self-defense, that's a thing.
Oh, look, a rattlesnake. Hey, stop reaching. Bam, bam, bam. Man, that's what I'm going to feel like.
Does the rattlesnake have immunity or something like that? It's like the rattlesnake whips out some reading glasses and a law book and says, "See, it's actually illegal to kill me, so I will bite you whether you want it or not."
Man, the snake sits there. The snake man starts looking worried when it sees it. He turns around to its wife and goes, "Honey, call 911 now. Get him out here. Get the cops out here. This guy's about to do something." Man, it's like, what's he gonna do? I don't know. But I'll have to keep that in mind, folks. That apparently you can't take out snakes left and right here in Utah. Apparently. Why is that law on the books? I have a feeling that it's on the books because rattlesnakes. Oh yeah. So apparently I just saw this, man. I just read an article. Apparently people were wiping out rattlesnakes here in Utah, like they were trying to make them extinct. So in 1989, they made that a law to where you couldn't kill them anymore because they were an endangered species in the state at that point.
That might be wise, actually, because even though I hate rattlesnakes, they are important for the ecosystem, like the food chain and stuff like that. Like if you start, wiping out all the rattlesnakes, then you might start having a problem with your other animals, getting out of control, not being kept in population check. But Alabama's not like that, though. Alabama's like, wipe the damn things out. It's like those
Run them
snakes are
over.
going left and right.
Man, out here, man, they had like the damn Mormon death squads going up in the hills wiping these things out, apparently. Because I mean, they're saying that these things were getting killed almost at the rate buffalo were getting killed in the plains, nearly, according to what they're saying. And it was getting so bad. This was back, by the way, kind of like in the major ecological pushes of the 80s, like when they found out DDT was causing the bald eagle to start becoming an endangered species because the eggs, like the keratin in the eggs of the eagle shells was becoming weak, and the eggs were literally just breaking open, because they were so weak. Did you know about that?
No, but I was just reading something else that's crazy. Do you know why that rattlesnake law was put into effect? Like, what the real reason?
What?
There's a rattlesnake lobby out here, and the chairman is a rattlesnake.
That's bull. Like, that is straight up bull. That
Man,
is
you get to be the April Fool of the day, I tell you.
Man, April Fool, you fool. I'll be like, no way in hell. But apparently that's the reason why they've outlawed that here in the state. That makes sense, because you don't want snakes going extinct. Generally, whenever I think snakes might actually be something along the lines of a keystone species in a way. So if you wipe out snakes, that could really have a lot of nasty repercussions for the ecosystem that could throw it way out of balance. So that makes sense in a way, but I still don't like the idea, at least in my opinion, of, like snakes just generally having like a defense, like if you take it out even after it bit you or it tried to bite you or something, and then they're like, oh my god, you're being charged under the criminal code of Utah for killing a snake. It's like, that seems kind of a little excessive, know?
They're not going to do that. If it's like you're protecting your life or something like that, they're not going to do something like that. You know how it is. Like sometimes laws are on the books. They could enforce it, but if it's like you're protecting yourself, like the snake's like backed you into a corner or something like that, and it's like I'm going to get your ass, and then you're like and then you're like bang 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 bang, you like take care of that snake. They're not going to charge you over that. That'd be stupid.
I would have to say probably not, but like, what do you go to court and you have to like prove in a trial like it was in self-defense? Pull up the body cam and like the snake pulls out a knife. You're like, put it on the ground, bam, bam, bam. Like it's like, man, I don't know. But anyways, with that, I hope that does address that well. Interesting little thing about Utah apparently. And with that, we are on to the next one.
All right, and our next one's going to go to Acute Darkness, who puts in $8.25. And thank you very much, Acute, for that $25 support. And they said, when the U.S. and Israel attack a metallurgy plant, do they tell the civilian employees first so they have a chance to leave? And love you guys, and LSA.
Unfortunately, I don't know. So I would have to declare ignorance on that one. I hope that they would, but I didn't hear about that before the strikes, so I'm guessing that might not be the case. But a huge thanks to you for the support and helping this channel to keep on running. Because if it wasn't for folks like you, we wouldn't be able to make this channel possible, and we wouldn't be able to keep this thing running. And so a huge thanks to you so much once again. And with that, we are on to the next one.
And our next one goes to Bad Skipper, who puts in a 20. And thank you very much, Bad Skipper, for that $20 support. And they said first green will be in San Diego. And they said Electric Revolution.
Electric? We're gonna rock down to Electric Avenue. And unfortunately, I just don't know a lot about that. But I do thank you for support and helping this channel to keep on running. And I hope that is a fun time, whatever that Electric Revolution may be. And so a huge thanks to you for the support.
Wait a second. Is that Electric Bobcats? Is that what he's talking about? He said Electric Revolution. I'm seeing like a company that makes like electric Bobcats and stuff like that.
Really?
Yeah, it looks like it. It looks like electric equipment. Honestly, like I'm not against electric equipment or electric stuff, but it seems like when you're like in an industry, like the last thing you want to do is worry about charging something. Like you just need to put more gas in it because you gotta do that to make a living. So it seems like they'd want to just probably stick with gas. But I mean, depending on the battery power, I guess it could work.
I suppose. I mean, I suppose that we could see it work. But I mean, then again, the electric motors are torqued out. For the larger part, compared to internal combustion engines. But I mean, in a lot of industrial applications, you're not really going to see that come into play. So, I guess, sous la vie, whatever they say. But a big thanks to you for support and helping this channel to keep on running. And with that, we are on to the next one.
We also have a 20 from Game Theory, and thank you, Game Theory, for that $20 support. They said, Matt, why did you not go on to a Washington, D.C. lobby firm after college, and you have good analysis, and along with tour bro, Andrew? And also, thank you, by the way, for the kind words. The reason, typically, like, you don't go straight to a lobby firm like after you leave college. Like, to be a lobbyist, basically, lobbyist is code word for somebody with really good connections, and they're able to convince people that are in positions of power. So they're basically access. They're people with access to people that other people need access to, basically. So coming straight out of college, most college kids aren't going to have connections like that. And also, they're not going to have the leverage to be a good lobbyist. So you generally have to sort of hang out around DC for a while, sometimes work for some companies that have some pull, and then occasionally you might build up enough, what you call it, stamina, I guess reputation to be a lobbyist for the most part. So, also, by the way, I will admit this, lobbyists don't have the best reputation because these days, people are very, very hard or very sick of the whole lobby in America, because it seems like lobbyists are getting more influence than the normal everyday people for the most part. But I do appreciate the compliment, though, but that's generally why I did not. But Enforcer, what say you?
What do we look like to you? Some guy who wrote a book called Hillbilly Elegy that then went to Yale? That'd be ridiculous. Like, imagine that. Some guy growing up in some town claiming that he's from some, bottom of the rung family, that's basically like the rest of us just middling and getting by. And then they go into the Marines for like 4 years and then they end up at Yale. Like, that would be like an unrealistic story. That's like a fairy tale, basically. We didn't have that kind of luck at all. And that's why we would probably never be able to become lobbyists. And, that's why we also didn't do that going out of college, like Matthew was saying. And also, I'd have to say, I don't really know if I'd be a big fan of being a lobbyist, because what if I don't really like what I'm having to lobby for, Like, if I'm lobbying for, say, the war industry somehow, what if the war industry really doesn't have the answer to the problem that we're facing right now? At that point, I'm just going around going, excuse me, Mr. Congressman, can you put some more funding in to make more bombs? It's like, what if the United States doesn't need more bombs at that moment, and then I'm having to still go around and hawk the bombs or, hawk something else. And that's generally what I don't really like about lobbying, is that lobbying really isn't done in the best interest of the citizenry. It's done in the best interest of an interest group, of whatever group that may be. And, their interest may not be in the public's interest at that specific moment in time, like it was maybe a couple of years before that or a couple of years after that. But a big thanks to you for support. And also, thank you for the kind words. And with that, we are on to the next one.
All right, so our next one here is going to go to Jenna, last name Toolshed. And thank you very much for that $20 support. They said, I hope we make it to Uranus by 2069.
Oh, well, I tell you what, some people have already made it there. but anyways, big thanks to you for the support and helping this channel to keep on running. Because I've heard, folks, that there's some people out there that have really, really been putting NASA to the works. Some people have been hearing that some people have made it to the Uranus of I think it's like Chrysis or Mummius, already. And that's one hell of an advance in space exploration right there. That's a lot of room right there. It's kind of like flying down the side of a cliff. But anyway, so that big thanks to your support and helping this channel to keep on running. And with that, we're on to the next one.
We also have a 20 from Arar983, and thank you very much, Arar, for that 20 as well. He said, so apparently dogs were the first in space before humans, and check out the Soviet space dogs. And It's true. They did send the dogs. They sent the dogs. And I think we sent a chimpanzee at one point as well. What was the name of that thing? Spot? It wasn't Spot. It was...
Ham?
Ham, the chimpanzee. That was the one that we sent right there. So yeah.
There he is.
They really did him wrong.
Man, they honestly did. But they did a Leica even worse. They just let that dog die. But beyond that, though, if y'all don't know this is a funny story. Right when Leica was Leica wasn't the actual dog that was supposed to go up. They actually had a dog that they had trained a lot for this mission. And they left the dog door open to the kennel that it was in, and it just ran away. So... then all the Soviet scientists were like, bleh, what do we do? And they just saw the stray dog, which happened to be Leica, and they just snatched it up off the street and threw it in the capsule and sent it up. It survived, for a while enough to prove that animal could survive up there. But it died before it came back down because it overheated and it got too hot in the capsule, so it just died. So that's kind of the story behind Laika. Unfortunate one, but still proved that, living things could go to space and survive to some extent. We did it with the chimp, and we made sure that the chimp survived, because that'd kind of be stupid to have the test subject die up there. It's just like, what if a human dies on reentry, and that was just like a guarantee at that point? We don't know. It's like we don't have a clue at that point in time historically. So, having your test subject die before it even re-enters the atmosphere and survives the entire voyage is kind of a stupid idea. But, once again, the Soviets don't really put a lot, or even the modern Russians don't really put a lot into thinking like that. So they just kind of winged it. But anyways, a big thanks to you for support and helping this channel to keep it running. And with that, we are on to the next one.
And our next one here is going to go to Sadata Hosoda, who just put in a $50 support. And thank you very much, Sadata, for that very generous support right there. They left a super sticker, no comment, but the super sticker shows the YouTube creature riding a ballistic out into the distance. But Enforcer, what say you?
And I got to thank you massively for that support and helping this channel to keep on running, Sadata Hosoda, because if it wasn't for folks like you, we wouldn't be able to be here right now. And so a tremendous thanks to you so much once again for the support and helping this channel to keep on running. And with that, we're on to the next one.
And we also have another 20 from Fred Freeman. And thank you very much, Fred, for that support. He said, higher oil prices are great for the USA. And honestly, it's brilliant not taking the strait. Why bother? It doesn't benefit the USA. It's really not our problem. We can sell arms, but let Europe and the Middle East fight the battles. But the problem is, Fred, the higher prices for the oil really doesn't help us. It may help the oil executives. It may help line their pockets, but it doesn't help the average 330 million Americans in the country, because I'm paying currently double my normal gasoline bill right now because the Strait of Hormuz is closed. So it's not doing normal people any good. The strait, it's going to affect global economies. And when the global economy starts having a problem, it affects every single country on the planet for the most part. So we're already seeing it, like in South Korea's stock market. It's having another major dive today. We're seeing fuel shortages all over Romania, all over Asian countries. It's causing a major effect, and they've known this for decades, by the way. This isn't something new. This is something that's been around for a very long time. So it's going to wreck the global economy. So it's really not good for anybody. But Enforcer, what say you?
I would generally have to agree with that. Higher oil prices really doesn't benefit anyone in the United States, unless if you're a shareholder, and a significant one at that, of an oil company here in the United States, and you're able to make dividends off of the increased earnings of those oil companies. And I would wager that you're not an executive of an oil company, and I know I'm sure as hell not an executive or a shareholder of a major oil company. So I don't see any benefit at all from rising oil prices here in the United States on my end. And just speaking for myself, which that's really all I can do, being a citizen of the Republic, if I'm not seeing a benefit, I'm not really for it. I'm not one, when it comes to money, that goes, oh, well, that's great that the oil executives are raking in billions while I'm out to lose my shirt because everything's going to be becoming more expensive on every single end. Because I'm not really that benevolent with my money, when it comes to other, the whole country and people like me getting screwed over for the few that run and own these oil companies. It's not really something that seems to me to be well in the interest of the United States, because it's not in the interest of me and people like me, and there's a lot more people like me than there are oil executives. Also, it does benefit the United States because oil is traded globally, so that means that if it is traded globally, and there's less of it in the world now than there was a month ago, the price is going to rise. And also that means that there's going to be material shortages of oil in most of the world, which doesn't really benefit us either. So I generally have to say, once again, I don't really see any benefit at all in the United States of America, or for anyone else in the Western sphere, that the Strait of Hormuz is closed. And I also got to say that the premise of the United States starting a war that then leads to the closure of the Strait of Hormuz because of our own actions really isn't anyone else's problem but our own. I think that's a very, just to be entirely honest with how the administration is going about it, it's a very spoiled and childish way of going about things, because it basically makes it clear that if they make a mistake, that's not their problem to own and try and fix. That then becomes everyone else's problem. And what does that say about their larger philosophy and thinking? Honestly, it's like, what does that say about their entire leadership and decision-making process in general? It shows, if it benefits me, then I'm fine with it. But if it doesn't look good and it doesn't benefit me and it doesn't look good for my image, I'm fine with lopping that off on whoever else that isn't me and make it their problem. And I'm not really one for that kind of a principle. We started the war. That's why the strait is closed. It's our problem to reopen the strait. I don't know how that's everyone else's problem, because also, if the Strait of Hormuz was Europe's problem and it was the Arabians' problem, why in the world were we the one to start the war against Iran? If nothing really counts for us over there at all, and it's all for naught, why the hell did we even start this war for that to happen in the first place? That doesn't make any sense at all. That's just basically saying at that point we bombed them for the hell of it, and there isn't really any larger strategic picture or any benefit to our sphere or ourselves nationally. We just bombed them for the hell of it, and all of the fallout from that, it's now everyone else's problem. And, that's something I generally can't agree with. If I make a mistake, I own up to it and I just accept that it's my mistake and I fix it. Or I try and make it right. I never sit there and make a mistake and then have what the president has, a narcissistic way of thinking to where I can never be wrong, and if I am wrong, I'm not wrong. It's everyone else's problem now, and they've got to fix it. And that's just not really a way that, one, you run a nation, and two, the way I run my personal life. So, personally, I'd have to say that's our problem. We broke it, you buy it. So, we broke the strait. We have to buy the strait now, and we have to fix it somehow because we're the reason why it's that way. So, a big thanks to you for the support. And with that, we're on to the next one.
We also have a $50 support that just came in from Jenna, last name Toolshed, once again. And thank you very much, Jenna, for that support and also helping to get the channel running once again. They said, right now, the U.S. is in somewhat of a denial phase of the war. And if you're not going to help after I tariffed you and sided with Putin, then I'm just going to leave the mess to you. And right now, they're acting very petulant, like a baby. Oh, wait. So I had to abridge it a little bit so that way I didn't get political or too political with it. But the U.S. The U.S. is in a denial phase somewhat, but the U.S. isn't really willing to acknowledge that they had a major oversight with the Strait of Hormuz situation, and that's my main complaint. Like, everything else is a side note compared to the Strait of Hormuz at this point. Also, by the way, we'll have to wait and see if they retrieve the uranium. If they don't retrieve that, then that might be a huge objective of the war that has not been accomplished for the most part. But to me, the Strait of Hormuz, that was known, like I mentioned a moment ago, for decades, that if anybody tried to invade Iran or attack Iran, they were immediately going to try to use that choke point to their advantage. And they had been wargaming that for decades. And it makes me wonder, why wasn't that adhered to during this attack right now? Since it was a war game for such a long time, why would they forget about it? But Enforcer, what say you?
I would have to say, generally, that's one thing that's been annoying me quite a great deal as well, is that how the Strait of Hormuz is basically looked at as a sideshow. And the strategic planning is completely off. And everyone keeps on saying, well, he has a plan. Well, if he has a plan, why hasn't it been fixed yet? I'm just going to, let me be honest here. The president says that he's the greatest person in the world, who's the smartest person in the world in every way. He says that the U.S. military is the most powerful military in the world, and we can do whatever we want, and we can defeat anyone in the world. We can fight everyone in the world at the same time and win hands down in about a year. And for some reason, somehow, some way, he has this plan to clear the Strait of Hormuz, but with all that bluster and bravado about how he's the smartest guy in the world, and he's got the biggest military behind him in the world that can do anything and fight everyone, we can't open one tiny little strip of water that's 30 miles wide and about 40 miles long. How does that line up? That's my problem with this, is that we're saying that we're beating the Iranians every day, but in the one battle they're really besting us in, we don't even dare to even try and fight them in that one. And that's the one that really annoys me a lot, because at this point, every single guy in the IRGC could be alive 3 months from now, and if the Strait of Hormuz is closed, it really didn't make a hell of a difference how many IRGC guys the U.S. killed and how many ammo depots we blew up in their country, because we're still going to be economically starved for oil and resources at that point, which isn't a great position for us to be in. That would be my 2 cents on it. That's what has been annoying me greatly. And I just find it crazy how basically at this point, the president is pretty much just coming out and admitting there was no plan. And people want to still say that there is a plan. If a president of the United States comes out, folks, and says that we don't have any military plans to reopen the strait and the war will end and it'll just kind of naturally reopen on its own, that means there's no plan. Like no matter how much self-aggrandizing there is tomorrow about how smart the guy is, if he says that today, that clearly lets us know there was no plan. Because if there was one, why haven't they done it yet? If they could open up the strait tomorrow by just bombing some stuff in Iran, like he keeps claiming, why don't they just do that tomorrow and open the strait?
I mean, no plan is a plan.
I guess. I mean, that's kind of like no philosophy is a philosophy, but
yeah, there was a sales guy out there at one point that said, no interest level is an interest level. It's called no interest. It's, I mean, you're not wrong. I mean, I guess you could say it that way, but I mean, to say the strait's going to reopen naturally, I mean, that shows the U.S. doesn't want anything to do with it for the most part. But I mean, the U.S. has to do something here because right now the regime is still in charge. There hasn't been regime change. I don't care what they're saying. The Ayatollah's son is in charge, so I mean, there's no regime change. Also, they still have the enriched uranium that has not been retrieved and it hasn't been destroyed. So that's another objective that really hasn't been accomplished either. And then the big one, the Strait of Hormuz, is still closed. So I mean, the only thing that's been accomplished at this point is we've caused hell inside of Iran, destroying a lot of their launchers and some of their strategic IRGC sites. But outside of that, the main objectives are still unaccomplished right now.
I mean, honestly, that's really the case of it. And I just got to tell you, folks, that's kind of my qualm with this whole thing. And if any other administration was around, like for example, the last one when they dealt with the Houthis and they basically did nothing to them, we did nothing to them, and they're still right now threatening the Bab el-Mandeb. Like I said they would in the future. I was like, if war starts with Iran, not only could the Iranians try and blockade the Strait of Hormuz, the Houthis could close the Bab el-Mandeb, which would also make the situation even worse. And, everyone wanted to diss on that back then, and it's happening now. They're going to close the Bab el-Mandeb at some point here in the future with this war going how it's going. And then we're going to deal with the closure of 2 main waterways instead of 1. And then we look at this right now and we go, well, that really needs to be open because that's not going to be a great thing for it to stay closed. And how we're going about this right now isn't good. And everyone always wants to come up with excuses, oh, well, the war isn't over yet. I mean, I got to say, folks, how in the world would that work in any other period of history if it wasn't this guy who was in charge? How would that work for y'all? Will y'all be saying that still? I'm just wondering about that because a lot of political bias gets into a lot of people's opinions on stuff, and I wish that people would remove their political bias from analysis and just look at things clearly, because if something's not going well and someone clearly doesn't have a plan, it's not going well and someone clearly doesn't have a plan. That's not dissing on them. If they didn't want to get dissed on, if that's what they think it is, by calling out something that's clearly obvious, then they should have had a plan and they should have executed the war a lot better. That's my 2 cents on it. That's not my problem. That's theirs. Don't give me something to complain about and I won't complain about it. That's really the way that the government ought to run, instead of me having to pretend like they didn't F something up. But anyways, with that, I hope that does address that the best I can. And a big thanks to you for support and helping this channel to keep on running. And with that, we're on to the next one.
We also have a $14 support from Chris Alexander. And thank you very much, Chris, for that support. We do appreciate that. He said, I heard about the amount of Ayatollah and IRGC members who have allegedly come to Canada and even gotten memberships within some churches to hide their identity. Have you heard anything about that?
We've heard a little bit about it. That's generally actually where a lot of Hezbollah people also go as well, from Lebanon. And it's always interesting, because they kind of put on this front like they run nice companies and stuff that do things, and they really don't do anything, and they don't even know what they do for a job. That kind of a thing. Yeah, but generally, yes, we have heard about that and we're aware of it. And so a big thanks to you for support and helping this channel to keep it running. And I hope that does address that well. And with that, we're on to the next one.
We also have a $10 support from Pookie, and thank you very much, Pookie, for that 10. And they said, here's for a rotisserie chicken from Costco, from the Strait of Hormuz, and LSA.
And LSA, and a humongous thanks to you for support, and thank you so much for giving us a Costco chicken straight off of a container ship. And so a humongous thanks to you for support and helping this channel to keep on running. And with that, also, oh man, here's more people. Well, the U.S. president can't tell us about a secret plan. He doesn't have to, right? He doesn't have to give all the details.
He told us today. He said they're going to let it open naturally. So that is essentially no plan, basically.
But here's why, folks. There is no plan. If there was a plan, it would stay consistent. The public statement, it would be this simple: we are going to open the strait, or we are opening the strait right now, and it's just going to take a little more time. But every day, it's a totally different plan. So we're going to kill everyone in Iran one day, according to the president, to open up the strait. The next day, it's not our problem, it's Europe's problem. The day after that, we're actually going to bomb the Iranian Navy to open up the strait. Then the day after that, we're just going to let it open naturally. And if the plan is changing that drastically every day when it's announced, that means that there is no active plan, because clearly you're not able to execute every one of those plans that day and then go with another one the next day. So that clearly shows there's no plan to clear it, because otherwise it would just be straightforward. We're clearing the strait and it's going to be open, and that would be that. There's no reason to expound further, and then we would be seeing actions down there that would clearly be showing us that they're doing that, and we're not seeing either of those, and that's why they don't have a plan. That's just putting two and two together. I know that common sense for some people is hard to grasp, but looking at 2 and 2, you can easily deduce there is no plan. So with that, we're on the next one.
So our next one goes to Frosty Rotor, who puts in a 10. And thank you very much, Frosty, for that $10 support. They said, what do you think of the strategy I came up with to have air power loiter above the strait and then send a decoy vessel through the strait to expose coastal battery positions and then take them out?
That's largely a really solid concept. That's generally what we would have to do, is we'd have to basically bait their fire and see where they're firing from and then hit them. And that would basically be the best way for us to clear most of the surface batteries out of the picture, drone and missile based, and then start working on demining later once those threats are mitigated to a significant point. So I hope that does address it the best I can. And a big thanks to you for support and helping this channel to keep on running. And with that, we are on to the next one.
And our next one goes to Mary, who puts in a 10. And thank you very much, Mary, for that support. And they said, we're always told we're one step ahead. So after today, what are we missing? Is this pressure in the strait already influencing other powers behind the scenes? Honestly, I think it goes deeper than that. Personally, I think China might have known that this was going to happen, and they are capitalizing on it. And we can see right now. And there was actually a pretty decent illustration that came out on the cover of The Economist, where it shows Xi Jinping like looking over the shoulder of the U.S. president and saying, "Never interrupt your enemy when they're making a mistake." I feel like that is truly the way China is looking at this. They see the U.S. making a mistake, which I would say the blunder with the Strait of Hormuz is a pretty large mistake, and China is capitalizing on it. Like, for example, allowing Iran to collect the $2 million toll in Chinese yuan. That's obviously a Chinese capitalization on it. Also, they're giving Iran a whole bunch of targeting information to harm U.S. forces and also degrade our force status in the region, and so is Russia. So, I mean, they're definitely capitalizing. I would say so. But Enforcer, what say you?
I would say that they're definitely capitalizing on it as well. And I'd have to say, generally, right now, that's really just a situation. Everyone's just watching the U.S. kind of flounder around at this point on the larger grand planning of things, and just basically waiting to see how it goes, and hopefully expecting that it'll go about as badly as it could. So big thanks to you for supporting helping this channel to keep it running. I hope that does address that well. And with that, we're on to the next one.
We also have a 10 from Tequila, who said NATO is not keeping pace with the U.S. in defensive terms and needed a huge wake-up call, and China and Russia working together is a dangerous combo when the U.S. has weak friends. He called them scared little wimps, in his words, USA. I mean, how are they scared of wimps, though? I mean, how are they scared of wimps? I mean, they weren't scared wimps when we activated Article 5 after 9/11 and they came to our aid. We weren't calling them wimps when we needed their assistance. But, just because, Europe doesn't have to respond to our war in Iran. Like, they're not obligated to do that. The U.S. has not tried to activate NATO Article 5. There's been no obligation to assist. So if the U.S. wants to go and invade Iran because they feel it's necessary and Europe does not feel it's necessary, there's nothing compelling Europe to get involved. The U.S. did that on their own volition. There was nothing that forced the United States to do it. We could have let Iran develop a nuke if we wanted to. It would have been probably unwise, but it was something the U.S. chose to do preemptively. So, I don't understand the whole point about making Europe enemies. When the World War III breaks out, we're going to wish we had Europe. But Enforcer, what say you?
Nobody in the world's keeping up with the United States in defensive terms. I feel like that's a wildly unfair analysis that people keep giving to Europe, because is China at all up to our military capabilities in spending or anything? No. Is Russia? Hell no. Is anybody else in the world? No. Who is the closest? the European Union or the European part of NATO. They're the only ones that come close to us, and even still, they're not to where we're at in military spending and military capabilities. So I don't know why in the world everyone always acts like the Europeans need to be step in step with America, because not even our adversaries, our biggest one, which is China, is even close to being as militarily competent or capable as we are in military spending or anything else. And also on top of that, if we compare all of Europe's combined military spending versus China's, Europe spends about 150 billion more on their combined armies annually than China does. So if China is looked at by you, I would assume, as a strong country, and Russia's looked at as a strong country, which was spending only in the pre-war before Ukraine about 50 billion annually, which is smaller than Britain's military budget even, then why in the world is Europe a wimp? Like, I feel like that, I would have to be straight up with y'all. I can't even hide this and say and not say this. That is nothing but a lie put out by a certain political group in this country to make Europe sound like an enemy and heavy baggage that we're carrying around with us, which isn't even true. And if we throw away that baggage, who do we even pick up to replace them?
Yeah, how come Europe's a wimp, but Russia's strong? But yet Russia is losing a war like a punk right now. Like, they're getting their asses whooped by the Ukrainians, which was supposed to be an easy work for Russia. It was supposed to be, oh, Russia will go in there, they'll be one and done in a few days, maybe a few days, possibly at the worst. But yet Russia's getting their ass whooped 4 years in. But yet at the same time, though, you got to be careful with Russia because it's a strong power, but Europe's wimps. I'm like, I mean, come on now. I mean, why are we trying to make enemies out of Europe so bad? And why are we chumming up to Russia so much? I don't like that.
And also on top of that, like our next closest power that's a threat to the United States is China. So if we're comparing Europe as a whole, because none of them operate individually, they operate as a large group at this point. It's almost a confederation at this point. So we look at the whole confederation of Europe in the European Union, and then we compare them to China. How in the world are they any weaker than China? They're stronger than China. So where in the world are they weak? Where are they wimps? You know, like, the fact that they don't want to join our war in Iran is their own right. Like, you know, we aren't Europe's bitch. Whenever they start a war somewhere, we don't have to go follow them. We can decide to opt out if we want to, and we do. They have that same right just like us, because an alliance is a two-way street. It's never a one-way street where we act like we're the top dog and they're just our bitches and we order them around to do whatever we want. That's called being generally exploitative, and that's how you end up not having allies. So I would generally have to heavily disagree with you there. Europe is the strongest and most powerful military alliance in the world, and we're quite lucky to have them as allies, and they're quite lucky to have us as allies. It's very mutual there, and I don't know why everyone's trying to keep on pretending like the Europeans are nothing but a bunch of weak wimps. The last time I ever went over there, they looked like fairly competent people to me, and so, you know, that'd be my 2 cents on it. And then someone's about to come crawling out of the woodwork and tell me that Israel, a country of 6 million people, is somehow more powerful than about 700 million people in Europe in the combined arms and forces of the NATO alliance. I'm going to find that argument to be wildly hilarious. You know, Israel, with its $25 billion military budget, far more competent and powerful than the British, even with their $75 billion military budget. Obviously, just clearly. I mean, like, you know, Israel doesn't have a single aircraft carrier. Britain has 2 alone. Just Britain. That's not speaking about anyone else in Europe. You know, and I can't wait for someone to try and make that argument. Well, clearly,
Somebody
you know,
might make it.
Huh?
Somebody might make it eventually.
Yeah, someone might make it eventually. I'm waiting for it. But anyway, so that we're on to the next one.
But our next one goes to Matty Matt, who puts in a 10. And thank you very much, Matty, for that $10 support. He said, hello from Ashland, Oregon.
Oh, hello.
And did it take you guys a while to acclimate to the elevation in Salt Lake? It really didn't take that long, surprisingly. It took me about a week and a half to get used to it, and then after that, I was pretty good. But Enforcer, what say you?
I would say that it took a couple of weeks for me, but honestly, it was pretty easy to get used to after a couple of weeks. Some people apparently are pretty messed up by it, but we were very fortunate to not take a lot of time to acclimate to it. And now it's like just living in Alabama, really. So a huge thanks to you for the support and helping this channel to keep on running, because if it wasn't for folks like you, we wouldn't be able to keep this thing running. And with that, we're on to the next one.
We also have a 10 from Mary once again, who said, is this moment about control of the strait or about shaping global behavior without ever saying it out loud?
I would say It's really more so about shaping global behavior, because controlling a major waterway or a shipping lane is really about changing the strategic face of things on the globe, because now Iran basically is the toll booth and the toll holder on Hormuz. So anyone who wants to deal with anyone else in the Middle East has to deal with Iran, and that puts them in a significant power brokering position for anyone that needs energy resources from the Middle East. So it's generally shaping the strategic picture globally at that point.
Yeah. And also, by the way, here's another point that I didn't make earlier about, the Chinese yuan that the toll is being accepted in. How do you get your hands on Chinese yuan? Like, for example, if you're a shipping company that wants to send oil through the strait and you have to pay Iran's toll, how do you get your hands on Chinese currency?
I mean, you have to start trading in Chinese yuan apparently and renminbi.
Yeah, but like, how do you get the yuan? Like, how do you get it? Like, what will China accept to give out their currency so that way you can pay the toll?
Probably significant diplomatic relations with them and economic relations.
No, they'll accept gold. They'll accept gold in exchange for yuan. So, China's probably going to use that for leverage. They're probably going to want gold in exchange for giving out their currency. So it's going to start forcing people to start using China's currency, which, is not the world's reserve currency, by the way. Right now, the US dollar is the world's reserve currency. So this has the potential, if it stays closed for a while, to put a dent in the US dollar's dominance around the world.
Yeah, that's actually true. I didn't think about it that way, but that's actually a way that they could try and get at the United States strategically through the Iranians. So it's reshaping the strategic picture, and certainly not in our favor, which a lot of people seem to love to keep on overlooking. But, people have got to get their oil, and their only option might be the Middle East. So, then that kind of forces them to start moving away from us and more towards China and the Axis powers, which starts to offset the balance of power against us and out of our favor. But with that, I hope that has addressed it the best I can. And a big thanks to you for support and helping this channel to keep on running. And with that, we are on to the next one.
And we also have a $10 support from Pacific Fruit Express. And thank you very much for that support. They said the Senate will never approve the USA leaving NATO. And I think you're correct, by the way. I saw a bipartisan Republican and Democrat, pretty top-ranking senators come out today and say that is not going to happen, which I was very pleased to see because, the legislature has a job to do, and I'm glad to see that they chose to do it this time. But Enforcer, what say you?
I'd have to say that I would agree with Enforcer Matt there. We're not getting out of NATO. And also that bilateral statement was a very positive one to see. I was very appreciative of that because that would be stupid to do. And also, I saw someone say, can't fight us outright, as far as I think the Chinese. Well, something that's kind of funny about that, though. I got to say this. With the kind of strategic planning we have right now, anybody could fight us. And even with our overwhelming force of arms, they might be able to actually have a good run for their money. Because I remember a lot of people were telling me when I was saying, they could blockade the Strait of Hormuz and this thing could go on for a couple of months. And I was saying that before the war started. I was like, well, the Iranians aren't going to collapse in days. That's never going to happen. It's not even going to be weeks. It's probably going to be months, a lot like the Gulf War. So it's going to be at least a half year. And on top of that, they could blockade the Strait of Hormuz. And so many people wanted to tell me, America's too strong and powerful and smart and cunning to have that happen. We're going to blast through the Hormuz in hours. And that's not even going to be a problem. We can clear 50, I remember everyone kept on quoting this one to me, 50 miles of minefield in 6 hours. Well, it's a month later. That's a lot of 6 hours. And they haven't done it yet. And the strait's still closed. So, maybe, just maybe, folks, maybe overconfidence isn't something that we should have in this country. And maybe we should go back to what we've done for our entire national history up until the past 6 years, really. Which is to pretend like all of our enemies are stronger than us and more powerful than us and plan from that perspective, because at that point, there's no way that we can lose because we've factored in every single way that we could and how to avoid that. Maybe we need to do that instead of just being wildly overconfident on everything and basically leading ourselves into a slaughterhouse in one way or another in every corner of the world because we're way too confident in our own abilities. Maybe we should do that. That sounds like a smart move to me.
Yep, probably so.
Yeah, and so with that, we're on to the next one.
We also have a 10 from Sadana Hosoda, and thank you very much, Sadana, for that $10 support once again, and we do appreciate that. And we also have a 5 from Ken Shearbeck, and thank you, Ken, as well, for throwing in that support and also helping to keep the channel running. We also have a 10 from Pacific Fruit Express once again, who said, the more my friend talks crap about leaving his girl, the more I know he is worried she will dump him. Her name is NATO.
Ooh, oh man.
Oh.
Pacific Fruit Express is dropping facts and oranges, and I gotta appreciate that. And I gotta thank you so much for the support and helping this channel to keep on running. And that was an interesting analysis right there. And so a big thanks to you for support and helping this channel to keep on running. And with that, we're on to the next one.
We also have a 10 from Pacific Fruit Express once again, and thank you very much. They said anybody with a phone can buy stocks these days. They just passed a law, 13 and over. Are you sure about that? But he said it balances out your fuel bill if you buy the company hurting your wallet. I don't know about that. I don't know about that. And also, by the way, I think you have to be well above 13 to have a brokerage account. Like I think you have to be older than that to have even a bank account for the most part. So I'm definitely not a brokerage account unless I'm mistaken. But Enforcer, what say you?
And I'd have to say that, I don't know about that one. I just wouldn't know enough about it to be able to comment on it. But I do thank you for support and helping this channel to keep it running. And with that, we're on to the next one.
We also have a 10 from Johnny, who said, why isn't the U.S. using a tactical warhead on a bunker buster so it can drill down to their missile stockpile and explode and get down a lot further than just a regular bunker buster?
Because using nuclear weapons is a big no-no, because nobody's done that since the Second World War, and doing that opens up a Pandora's box I don't really think anyone wants to see come to fruition, because we nuke Iran, the Russians nuke Ukraine, and that's generally how that's going to go for sure, and then we don't know what's going to happen from there, because at that point, everybody is now sanctioned at that point to use tactical nuclear weapons at a minimum in any conventional conflict they get into, which makes things a lot more risky and scarier moving on from there strategically in the world. So I hope that does address it the best I can. Big thanks to your support, and with that, we are on to the next one.
And we also have a 5 from Laser. He said, I welcome our new orb overlord.
And, you know, the orb's been around for a minute, and we love the orb. We love the orb. And so a big thanks to you for support and helping the channel to keep on running. And with that, we're on to the next one.
Also, by the way, I found out where they say that the alien breeding program is headquartered at. Hey, did you hear where it was headquartered at?
Where?
They're saying it's under the water in the Gulf Coast.
Oh my God. Is it near that BP oil spill?
Well, see, that's why they wanted to rename it Gulf of America from Gulf of Mexico. That's really why they wanted to rename it, is because they wanted to put their name on the alien breeding habitat.
I see. They kind of like tadpoles that way, you know, like you know, like they're
Yeah.
kind of just down there in their little bowl, you know, like just in their little soup.
Yeah, it's interesting to me, though, that the woman who's pushing that whole bullshit right there about the alien breeding program, which is crazy talk, by the way, just made that perfectly clear, is the same one that's pushing the pro-Russian propaganda and also inviting over the Russian delegation from the Duma to go have a private tour of the U.S. Capitol building. So I don't think she's a good, credible source of information. Also, you don't have to be a genius to, know that sounds, batshit crazy.
Oh, wait a minute. You mean like the heavily devout Christian woman that brought over the party that sponsors state atheism and persecutes Christians, right? To then claim that the Ukrainians are persecuting Christians. That person.
Yeah, I mean, possibly, yeah.
Oh my goodness. Wow. So basically, this person's stupid.
Pretty dumb. Possibly
Damn.
stupid. Possibly dumber than that.
Man, I gotta say, folks, I couldn't get over the irony of that. This woman that Matthew's talking about has kept claiming that the Ukrainians are conducting a genocide against Christians. No joke, that's their words, not mine. And then to show that and prove that somehow, she invites over a Russian delegation that includes the head of the Russian Communist Party. And if y'all don't know anything about communism, they state that all religion is nothing but creation to subdue the masses. And as a part of communist ideology, religion is outlawed and persecuted. So in her attempt to show that the Ukrainians are genociding Christians, she brings over the very Communist Party that genocided Christians in the Soviet Union. It's like, you really can't make that one up. Like that is literally just a work of the Onion almost at that point. But
She definitely doesn't know that, by the way. Like, she definitely does not know that. Like, oh man, I can tell you just by hearing her talk that she has probably not very much knowledge of history.
Probably not. She probably thinks the communist, and that's also something kind of crazy as well for them to always talk about the demonic socialist communist people, trying to undermine the nation and invite the literal leader of the Communist Party of Russia over. It's like, kind of feels like that's kind of counterintuitive to their whole movement, you know, of like going against that whole thing. Let's bring the leader of the Communist Party of Russia over for a dinner. You know, it's like, it seems to be going a little ass backwards, but well, who am I to judge? You know, they're 4 steps ahead of me, clearly. Real chess players here. But anyways, with that, we're on to the next one.
We also have a $20 support once again from Mary. And thank you very much, Mary, once again for supporting the channel. And they said, we've talked a lot about risks, but what are the actual wins from the past few weeks? And what has the U.S. done that's working right now that people aren't seeing?
Well, in the general strategic picture, not a whole lot, but in the tactical picture, there's been quite a bit. We have seen that a large amount of the Iranian Navy has been destroyed. A lot of elements of the Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps have been destroyed. A decent amount of their material base has been hit and knocked out. And generally, that's about it. I mean, those are really the only benefits that I can say. I mean, as far as our air campaigns going over Iran against their ground forces and air forces, and even their Navy, it's been going wildly well. I mean, I can't really deny that. But as far as our strategic planning, which is kind of on another level, it's not tactical operations like those are in the form of sorties. On our strategic operations, there really isn't a lot positive to say, sadly. But tactically, so I'll summarize it like this. Tactically, things are going quite well. Strategically, things are going quite poorly. So I guess that's probably the best way I can explain it. But we generally look at the strategic side of things here because you can win a lot of battles, but you can still lose a war. And so, you know, that's why larger grand strategy and planning and that whole failing is really coming up on the channel a lot because, you know, we can bomb as many people in the IRGC and every person in the Iranian government, but if they keep the Strait of Hormuz closed, we can still end up largely losing this thing from a strategic perspective, even still. But a huge thanks to you for the support and helping this channel to keep running. I hope that does address that well. And with that, we're on to the next one.
We also have a 5 from WTF, who said, when 2 U.S. aircraft carriers sit in the Arabian Sea and one in the Mediterranean, I would then expect a ground deployment. And what say you? And thanks.
Generally, that could be the case, but really the more important thing to look for is amphibious ready groups, and we're about to have 2 in the region here very soon, and that's definitely what's showing us that there's going to be some sort of a ground operation happening incredibly soon. So a humongous thanks to you for the support and helping this channel to keep on running. I hope that does address that well, and with that, we are on to the next one.
We also have a 5 from Civil Defense, and unfortunately, this joke right here was so good, HR wanted to hear about it, so we can't read this one off. But thank you very much, Civil Defense, for that support. We also have a 5 from Frosty Roder, who said, "Rest in peace to my granny," and also sorry for your loss, by the way. He said,
"Rest in peace to Granny. She got hit by a bazooka."
I was getting serious, and I was being serious there for a minute, but yeah, rest in peace to Granny. She got hit by a bazooka, I guess. But damn.
Man, you said, "I'm so sorry for your loss. She got hit by a bazooka." Like, I was like, oh my God.
I stopped thinking because I was like, oh, condolences. And then I read on a little bit more. I was like, oh, hit by a bazooka. I was like, well, unless Granny was in the war zone, this isn't Russia, so I doubt Granny was in the war zone. So she's probably all right.
And I gotta say, a big thanks to your support, Frosty Roder, and I like the joke there. That was a pretty good one. And so with that, a big thanks to you once again. And with that, we are on to the next one.
And we also have a 5 from Nothing Special Here, who said, "You guys are great in analyzing armed conflicts, but should stay away from politics. And we have corrupted and dumb judges." Well, here's the thing though. Like, I was trying to explain this on Twitter today. We don't care. Like, we know we have, and I'm going to say the words. We have Republicans and we have Democrats that watch us. Yes, scary stuff. Scary stuff.
Get them away.
We have both parties that watch us. We don't care if y'all are on either side. Like, I personally have friends that are both. And some of them are hard left and some of them are hard right, for the most part. I grew up in Alabama, so obviously I have friends that are on the hard right. It's Alabama. I also have friends that are on the hard left as well. I don't get into like, oh, I hate you because you have this perspective or not. I hear things that make sense from both sides occasionally. They make sense. But we're not here to tell people what they're supposed to be voting for, etc. Like, y'all vote for whatever you want. But at the same time, we're not going to bend our analysis that way it agrees with one side and, doesn't offend the other. Otherwise, what are we at that point? We're no better than any other channel and mainstream media at that point. So if we happen to make a few people angry that are extremists that can't handle a objective opinion because they're too political, I mean, we don't mind losing those people to keep it objective. But Enforcer, what say you?
I generally have to agree, and I'd have to say, like, there's a certain political leaning to this thing, and I kind of got to recognize that to that comment. And it's really interesting to me that whenever we criticize whoever's in charge, basically their followers come and act like we're now politically biased because we said that everything they're doing isn't perfect and going according to plan. Because in the last administration, when Biden was in charge and we said that he wasn't doing things all too well, Democrats would come out of the woodsheds to call us just bastards and hard right MAGA because we were criticizing him. Now it's flipped. So now Trump's in charge and he's a Republican. So whenever we say that he's not doing something great, now all the Republicans can want to come out of the woodshed and tell us that we're full of shit and that we're grifters and yada 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 and so on, just like we've dealt with for the past 3 years under Biden, because now it's a Republican in charge, and God forbid we ever insult anyone by saying their plans might not be perfectly baked and they might be half baked. And I gotta say, like, sorry if you don't like the analysis, but it's been completely neutral. I mean, we criticized Biden, we're going to criticize Trump. If I didn't criticize Trump, that'd be the part that'd be wildly unfair. I mean, we criticized Biden until the ends of the earth in the last administration, and we literally said at the end of his administration that whoever got elected, no matter who it was, they'd have to do better than him because his foreign policy was about as bad as it could get. I mean, there's no other form of a damning comment we can make about someone at the end of their term like that. I mean, that was literally the lowest of the low. I said, this guy has done worse than anyone else historically. Anyone coming after him could be better. And for some reason, like, very political people from the right currently have completely thrown that out, that we were saying that sort of stuff at the end of that last administration, because now we're saying that the current guy isn't doing everything perfect either. So now people like you want to say that we're getting political because we're saying that this isn't going well, when in reality, we're not getting political, it's just not going well, and that's how it is. Now, being political would be doing something like this. Watching this go as badly as it is right now, and then coming on air and telling all of y'all that it's going perfectly, it never could have been done better. The president is basically a god among men, the smartest ever. He could even defeat Napoleon and, Scipio Africanus. He could beat everyone on the planet because he's just such a smart guy, and he's just amazing, and we love him. Now, that would be political. But how this is going, if it was going well, we'd say it was going well. It's not going well. So, I mean, I think if it's
I just don't know why people can't say, like, for example, if you vote in, like, let's say it's one party, I'll use a fictitious name so that way nobody gets all offended that I'm using a specific actual party. Let's say you vote in a guy that's a part of the Bull Moose party or something like that, and he becomes the president, and you're an avid Bull Moose supporter, and then your guy gets in there, and he ends up doing a lot of damage. I mean, why can't those people that voted for the person just simply say, this isn't reflecting on the voter personally. You voted in the guy thinking he was going to do good, and it turns out you were mistaken, but you tried your best. You tried voting in somebody who you thought was going to do good, but they ended up being a flop. Why can't you just say, okay, this guy wasn't it. We'll try better next time. We'll vote in the next guy. Well, why do people entrench themselves to the point where it's like somebody can be doing a horrible job, and that the person that voted for him will literally die on that hill? They're doing a great job. They'll start going into like complete cognitive dissonance, convincing themselves that the person is doing good. So that way they don't look like fools, I guess. I'm like, I wouldn't judge a person. Like, even if they voted for somebody and they ended up doing a terrible job, it's like, I'm not going to berate the person because they happen to make a mistake and vote for the wrong person. I'm just going to be like, well, next time, let's be more careful about who we're voting in. We want to make sure they're qualified before voting in people that aren't qualified. That's the way I look at it. But, apparently people make it their whole personality. So when the person that they voted in fails or does a bad job, all of a sudden that person's entire personality is now at stake.
And the thing is, folks, is that we're not here to please everybody. There's people who leave the show every single night that are wildly unhappy. Back in the day, most of the people who were leaving the show were generally leaning on to the hard left because we would criticize Biden and they didn't like that. Nowadays, it's people that lean to the far right because now we're criticizing Trump. But the thing about analysis, folks, is that if the analysis is always coming back on someone and saying that they're never doing anything wrong and everything they're doing is right, that's not analysis anymore. That's straight up propaganda. That's not even true. There's no way in hell anyone could go through 4 years of being a president and not make one bad move. Like, that's when you know that something's straight up propaganda. That's why Fox News and CNN are full of shit, because Fox News will tell you that Republicans are never wrong and they only make the right moves, and CNN will tell you that the Democrats are right and they never make a wrong move as well, and they're both lying because they all make bad decisions. I mean, look at them. I mean, people sit here these days, and this is one thing that I find quite interesting here, is that people will say that, for example, having high gas prices is bad. And I agree. Like, I'll have to make that clear. I'm not talking about domestic politics here, but I agree because I like things to be cheap. I'm quite frugal. So when the gas prices were high in the last administration, we said on air, we were like, it's getting higher and it's not really that good. We don't like it. So then the gas prices came down. I like that. You know, I was pretty happy with that. Now they're going right back up to where they were. I didn't vote, you know, at all for a situation that would turn out to where the gas prices return back to where they were. I thought that was the general plan that everyone was kind of going for, that the prices would drop and stay low. And then when you bring that up, people want to say, oh, well, it's just temporary suffering, or it was like this in the last administration. It's like, yeah, but didn't y'all want to vote for better? You know, and then people don't hold it to that standard. You know, it's just, oh, well, it's as bad as the last guy, so that's fine. You know, and then if it's even worse, it's only going to be worse for a short period of time. Or if I say something like, you know, with the war not really going well in Iran, it just needs more time. And that's the one that gets me very tired and worn out quick, is that in the last administration and this one, the go-to like fail excuse, like if nothing else will work, they just go to, well, they just need more time. I mean, he's only been in for 3 years and the war's only been going on for a month. Clearly, you know, they just need more time. It's like, no, we need results. We don't vote in people and give them leniency. We vote them in. They're civil servants. They work their ass off to get results now, and they're not getting results, and that's not good. So I hope that does address that the best I can, but analysis is about as unbiased and fair as it can be, and if the analysis isn't coming out positive, that means it's not a good situation. But with that, I thank you for the support, and we're on to the next one.
Our next one goes to Star, who says, you know, I think the U.S. is right. NATO needs to get involved, and they can't expect us to fight every battle we start.
Oh, I get the punchline there. I saw that. I was like, what? Man, yeah, I was seeing that. I was like, what the hell? But anyways, a big thing here is where that's a pretty funny one. And with that, we're on to the next one.
We also have a 5 from Ulf Hednar, who said, why is lobbying legal? And it basically is legal bribery and encourages further corruption. Well, you know, people get that mixed up, though. Lobbying doesn't mean giving monetary gifts to people in political positions. That is bribery by definition. Lobbying is simply, you know, whining and dining these people. But the catch is, though, it's like, you know, we're not naive. It's like, you know, these people are hanging around the politicians. They have access to people that want stuff done for them, yada, yada, yada. You know, occasionally, you know, some hands get a little bit of greasy here and there and stuff like that. And, you know, it happens that way. But, you know, PACs are a problem. Lobbying's a problem. And whenever you have money in exchange for favors, you start having a major problem on your hands. And it starts disenfranchising voters that should have the power, not the people with the money. But Enforcer, what say you?
I would generally agree with Enforcer Matt on that one. I'm not really a big fan of lobbying or any sort of undue influence by particular interest groups in the country. I get that they're looking out for their interests, and that is respectable. But really how a democracy like ours, which is a federal republic, is supposed to work, is that the elected representatives really aren't supposed to be looking out for the interest of smaller groups. They're supposed to be looking out for the interest of their constituency, which is all of their citizenry, whether they voted for them or not. And lobbying generally degrades that quite heavily to where they might look out for special interests that aren't even within their district that they were voted in, just because they were lobbied heavily in their election and they were given a decent amount of super PAC money and whatnot to be able to be elected. And I generally think that that's an undue influence on our democratic institutions. I would have to agree. And so big thanks to you for support and helping this channel to keep on running. And with that, we're on to the next one.
We also have a 5 from Frosty Roder, who said, LMAO, that's the second time I got Matt with that. Sorry. And I think it might have been. I'm scrolling up real quick to see what it was again. Let's see here. Oh, yeah. I think it was the... Oh, yeah. You did get me the first time with that one, I will admit. But thank you very much, Frosty, for that support, and we do appreciate that. We also have a 3 from Plazoth, who said, could Netherlands, I believe, actually help with the U.S. with Iran? And if we were willing to, as we seem hesitant to help, but for a small country, we have a great defensive air power.
I would say... generally anyone can help. I mean, you know, it'd be great if they do help, but if they don't want to, you know, it's still our war. We started it and we have to finish it, whether people join us or not. It'd be great though. And the Netherlands certainly could help out in a decent amount of ways, especially in the air power scenarios. But with that, I hope that does address that well. And a big thanks to you for support. And with that, we're on to the next one.
We also have a 2 from the Shadow Queen Awakening, who said, why open the strait? Not our problem. I think we've addressed that one at length.
Yeah, I think we beat that horse dead. I was about to say that myself. I was like, I think we've beat that one to the ground at this point. Big thanks to your support. And with that, we're on to the next one.
We also have a two from Thomas, who said the school was a former military building, active base. I heard that. I will say though, I mean, ultimately the children were killed in the strike. So I mean, I don't even want to get into trying to make excuses for it. The U.S. screwed up from the looks of it, and you know, it's a tragedy, and that's pretty much all we can say about it. If now, granted, if evidence comes out that proves that somehow there was some military connection to it, then fair enough. But I mean, children ultimately got killed in the strike. So it's awful. We don't want to get like Russia, where we try to explain stuff away like that. But Enforcer, what say you?
If that's the case, isn't that a failure of intelligence? And shouldn't we see that whoever was working on gathering and providing that intelligence gets some form of a reprimand at a minimum for providing faulty intelligence? Because we don't make those kinds of mistakes. And I know someone's about to say, "Huh, you've never been in a war." Okay, well, when the Iranians invade the United States and they put a gun up to your family members, don't come crying to me that they're conducting war crimes. Because if you're all for war crimes against them, you know, then it's a free reign for everybody at that point. That was a horrific sort of a situation. Absolutely terrible. And there's really no way that we can try and excuse it. It was either an unfortunate tragedy to every extent, or there was something along the line somewhere that was responsible for that, and that needs to be corrected. Because, you know, if it was your child, if it was your daughter that was in that school, and they were bombed just because they were outside of the wall of a military base or whatnot, would you be saying that it is what it is? I mean, you wouldn't. And generally, the U.S. is supposed to be fighting civilly because we were, one, a signer of the Geneva Convention of 1949 and additional amendments afterwards. And on top of that, we're not a nation of barbarians. We're a civilized nation of civilized people, and I think a lot of people forget that these days. But I would say that I'm not a happy citizen with the U.S. military possibly reflecting that situation like that. And instead of us trying to say that we're going to do better, we're just going to brush it under the rug and pretend like that's not a problem. You know, that's my honest 2 cents on it. So a big thanks to you for support and help this channel keep on running. And with that, we're on to the next one.
We also have a 10 from Mary once again, who said, if the goal is a more unified country, why does our system reinforce party division at every step? And could a unified primary and shared executive structure work, or would it break down in practice?
Sadly, it would break down in practice. If you had a shared executive structure, you would have to have a deciding vote, meaning that you would have to have a panel of 3. You couldn't have, like, say, like the proconsuls of Rome, where there was only 2 of them. You would have to have 3 because there would have to be some sort of a tie-breaking vote somehow, some way, or you'd have to make that provision. Generally, it really wouldn't work all too well. The executive was designed initially to have a singular executive leader of the branch, which is the president. And that's the way that it should continue. But at the same time, though, people these days have got to ramp down the political extremism. Like it's unreal. I mean, like the amount of terroristic style threats that we've gotten just running this channel, and we don't even get into domestic politics. It is unreal how many we've gotten over the years, and it's from everyone. We've gotten them from the left and the right. And, you know, that's also why, folks, I'm not a big subscriber of any political ideology, because we've had people threatening to, you know, kill us from the left and the right over 4 years that we've been doing this. And I'm not a big fan of either group because, honestly, a lot of them are just violent and unintelligent people, at least the ones that are really invested in it like that. And so I would say they just got to ramp it down. I mean, like, if that's the way that they're trying to garner votes, that's a completely dishonorable way of trying to garner votes, is from mentally challenged, emotionally underdeveloped people on both ends that are pretty much being taken advantage of by a political system that preys upon the vulnerable and basically radicalizes them into violent, bloodthirsty individuals to try and garner a singular vote in a single district. But a big thanks to you for the support and help with this channel to keep it running, and I hope that does address that the best I can. And with that, we are on to the next one.
Also, a big shout out to Laura Brown, who put in a 2, and thank you very much, Laura, for that support, and we do appreciate that. We also have a 2 from Drosto, who said China has digital yuan, and that's true. I think they do have that, by the way. In fact, most payments in China are actually conducted through a QR code, which is kind of interesting. I've never visited China, and I never will. Because if I go there, I think I might get in some trouble for the things we said about the regime over there. But also, I really have no desire to even go to China. Even if I didn't have that problem, I don't even want to go. But they pay by QR code, and it's a very weird system that they have with that. But also, we have a 2 from Nothing Special here, who said Pakistan has more nuclear weapons than Europe.
I don't believe that's true. Let me go pull that up. Pakistan nuclear weapons number. Yeah, that's absolutely not true. They don't even have as many as France alone. France nuclear weapons number. So, let me show you this. So their current stockpile is, let's see here. Oh, let's see here. Total. Okay, so here we go. So here's the numbers. Pakistan has 170 nuclear weapons. France has 290 and Britain has 225. So the both of them combined are beating the Pakistanis in the numbers in spades. So Pakistan does not have that many nuclear weapons. So I hope that addresses that well. Big thanks to you for support. And with that, we are on to the next one.
And with that, folks, that is actually our last super chat to address. But once again, a huge shout out to everybody for supporting the channel, because it's that viewer support right there that keeps us running. And we turn down all the sponsorships in the world. And I literally have someone dinging my email right now talking about, I'm not even making this up, by the way. Like, I know, like, everybody these days, like, oh yeah, they're really beating our door down. But no joke, they really are. And unfortunately, it's kind of getting obnoxious at this point, to be perfectly honest. But anyways, though, we do appreciate that support very, very much. And it's now time to get into our Morse code decoders and also our live chat questions as well. So our Morse code decoders tonight were Paul Schultz, Kevin J, Mason Miami, Joni Dog, Norm Pritchett, Arabelle Garbo, Heroic Fluffness, Coach Copateric, Sire, and Brian Blairstown. They said, do you consider a cereal to be a pasta or a soup? I mean, it has to be one, or right? And LLT, LSA.
And that's the sound of money. Y'all hit that down on the nail. That's the Morse code message of the night. And I came up with that one on the fly tonight. I didn't really know what to put in there because it was going to be basically the same thing over and over every day at this point. So I was like, you know what? I'm going to ask the real questions that matter. Is cereal a pasta or is it a soup? Which one is it?
It's neither. It's a grain.
Well, I mean, like, you know, the cereal itself is grain, but like a bowl of cereal, you know, with the milk and stuff in it. Is that like a soup or is it like a pasta? You know, that's the real question right there.
It's wet grain.
Well, I mean, pasta's wet grain.
But it's like pasta.
Yeah, but I mean, it's still like in a sauce though, you know, and like, isn't the milk kind of like the sauce
wheat.
to the cereal?
It's puffed wheat.
I see that people are starting to get the answers in. Some people are like, it's a pasta, it's a soup, it's a liquid sandwich like a beer. I don't know about that one, Schwen. I think that one's pasta is a grain. Yeah, but cereal is also a grain as well. It's made out of wheat. It's shredded wheat and stuff like that, you know. And let's see, someone said,
you know something about the grain. You know something about that. You don't want to go against the grain. Like you know what I mean. Like you don't want to go against the grain. You've heard that.
Yeah, you don't want to go against the grain. That's why you need to accept it and eat your cereal like a good boy.
You should go with the grain.
You know, you shouldn't. You should always go with the grain, folks. You should always follow the crowd. But anyways, with that, all jokes aside, folks, all jokes aside, we're getting a lot of answers on this one, actually. It seems like people are actually intellectually flummoxed by this idea and must try and answer it. And I find that interesting. But y'all did get the Morse code message dead on the nail. That is absolutely correct. And I got to congratulate the Least Spinner Signal Corps once again for getting that dead on the nail time and time again. And so with that, folks, it is time for us to move on into the live chat questions. But unfortunately, due to time constraints, we'll sadly only be able to get 3, and then we'll have to round this thing out for the night. And so with that, we're on to the third to last question of the night.
And this one right here is going to go to AF Kaplan, who said, assuming the U.S. does pull out of NATO hypothetically, could the alliance survive? And if yes, for how long? And the alliance could survive indefinitely because of France's and also Britain's nuclear umbrella that they can extend to the entirety of the NATO alliance. It could survive indefinitely, but it would be weakened because if the United States wants to get really nasty, they could try to cut off weapon sales, which would put Europe at a major disadvantage. So I wouldn't put that past the current leadership, by the way. They're very vindictive, and also for some reason they have a personal bone to pick with Europe for whatever reason. So, you know, it could get nasty, but, you know, to get at that point, though, it'd have to get pretty extreme. But it could survive indefinitely, in my opinion. But Enforcer, what say you?
I would have to agree. It can survive indefinitely. It would be weakened a little bit, but generally, the European contingent of NATO is already self-sufficient. Whether people want to believe that or not, there's about to be some political lunatic gnashing at the teeth at that one. No, they're weak. It's like, well, I'm sorry, but, you know, facts don't care about your feelings. Oh, I remember when they used to say that. Now they're all in their feelings as well. The world is run by feelings these days in this country. It's really a sad thing. But outside of that, though, I'd have to say they generally would be fine on their own, but they would be significantly weakened, and we would also be significantly weakened as well for defensive purposes. It really benefits no one to do that, and so that would be my answer to your question. And so with that, we're on to the second to last question of the night.
We also have a question from Old Warrior Fella who said, what happens if Iran doesn't care about their population's hardship and that they are not that far past the Stone Age to begin with?
Well, then we just have to keep the war going at that point, because once a war starts, you really can't stop it until it's done. It's done when it's done is probably the best statement to make. When they say it, when it's done, it's done.
He's not wrong.
I mean, he's not on that one. I mean, a war is done when it's done. Someone has to tap out, and if they're not willing to tap out, the war keeps going until either they tap out or we tap out. And we generally want to be in a position where they're going to tap out before we do. And right now, that's a bit up in the air right now because of the whole Hormuz situation. So I hope that does address that the best I can. And with that, we are on to the final question of the night. And so, who is the lucky last person who threw in the lucky last question of the night?
And that viewer is going to be Sean Willem. And he said, not defending the U.S. actions, but could it be doublespeak, trying to make the Iranians think that we are not going to open the strait, but we will open it with ground forces? And I think there is some level of doublespeak involved, but the animosity toward Europe not helping, that is real. That's not manufactured. That's a common theme that we've seen over the last year or so. The Europeans are always getting shit on for the most part because there's some personal thing there. Who knows what it is? And honestly, I really don't care what the thing is. It's just some stupid personal squabble and a vendetta, basically. It's being carried out. So I think there will be some type of ground operation eventually. I think there will be. There's simply too many deployments of ground forces and ground-related assets for there not to be some type of ground operation. So on this one, I wouldn't take his word as fact. I would say that something's going to happen with the ground operation. But Enforcer, what say you?
I would have to say not quite. Because usually those sorts of statements, like the statements that are being made now, generally show that there still is almost no plan at all. And even if there is a ground landing, that wasn't a part of a larger overarching plan. It is probably going to be a sporadic last-minute decision sort of a deal. Because in World War II, for example, like I got to bring you all back to these examples because they're very important to remind people of historically. When the U.S. was going in and landing on Normandy Beach, we didn't put any pretense towards the Nazis whatsoever that we were going to do it and then we weren't going to do it and then we were going to go to Norway or maybe France or maybe this is just Britain's problem or the Soviet Union can do it or it's our problem now and we're going to bomb Berlin if they don't let us land. We didn't do all that crap. What we did back then is we said, we are landing on your shit. You better be ready. And then we lied to them where we were going to go because we did this whole thing called the Ghost Army, which a lot of y'all will know about because Patton was the commander of the Ghost Army, where we had a whole bunch of inflatable tanks and fake airplanes made out of balsa wood and a whole bunch of stuff like that we put near to well, actually not near Dunkirk. We actually put it near Dover, which made the Germans think we were going to land at Pas-de-Calais. Instead, we tricked them, and then we went and landed about 100 miles down the coast, down in Normandy Beach, or the Normandy Beach area on the Normandy coast. That's the kind of doublespeak that you do that's actually strategically beneficial and misleads an enemy into thinking that you're going to do one thing when you're actually going to do another. There is a grain of truth in it. We were going to invade France. But where we were invading France, that's what we lied to them about. But going out every day and saying this is Europe's problem, it's not ours, we're going to blow up everything and create a humanitarian crisis and a genocide in Iran if they don't open the strait, or we're just going to bomb the Iranian Navy and open the strait, or we're going to do nothing, it's going to open naturally. That doesn't even fall within a strategic picture because they know, much like we do, those LHDs and amphibious ready groups are showing up in the region. There's definitely some sort of a ground invasion going on somewhere, and those statements do nothing to throw them off that scent at a minimum. Like if we sat there and said, we are going to land in Iran, but we're going to land on Karg Island, and then we went to Hormuz, that would be beneficial. But what is currently being done right now with all the doublespeak, it literally serves no end and it serves no strategic purpose at all. Because historically, no one's ever done anything like this because it's absolutely harebrained and stupid. And everyone would be able to see through it quite easily because they'd be like, well, that's bullshit. I mean, what's the landing force here for? Like, clearly they're about to do something. So, that would be my 2 cents on it. But I hope that does address it the best we can. And before we round this thing out for the night, we actually have one last super chat to address here before we round this show out for the night. So, Matthew, what do we got?
So we have a $20 super chat from the Suckadelic, and thank you very much for that support, by the way, and we do appreciate that. They said, longtime LSA listener for years and finally able to donate. Left-leaning, but appreciate the criticisms of both parties, well-deserved, and no other analysts come close. And keep up the extraordinary work, fellas, and long live the LSA. And also, by the way, thank you for the kind words, by the way. We do appreciate that. And also, thank you for being a longtime channel legend, a viewer as well. And Enforcer, what say you?
I got to thank you massively for the support and helping this channel to keep on running. And I got to say, I thank you so much for appreciating our analysis and our work. We try our best here, and we hope that it's up to a high standard every night. And I hope that everyone knows that no matter what, we never hold any punches and we call the shots for what they are. Good, bad, and the ugly. And so a humongous thanks to you so much once again for support and helping this channel to keep it running. And with that, folks, we've reached the end of tonight's stream. I've got to thank you all so much once again for watching. It's been an absolute honor and a pleasure to be able to run the stream for all of you all once again. And with that in mind, we will see you all tomorrow at 10 p.m. Eastern Time to cover the next 24 hours of the news from around the world. And if there is a short war video to be made, Enforcer Matt will be the one making that short war video. I know
me?
Who, me? He was the one who was supposed to make it yesterday, but due to special circumstances, he will also be the one making it tomorrow if there is time to make one tomorrow and news to make one tomorrow. But hopefully we'll have something really cool to show y'all on the Patreon tomorrow afternoon. But anyways, with that, I thank you all so much once again for watching. And with that, good night, good luck, take care, stay safe. Slava Ukraini, Herom Slava. Long live the Late Spring Army, and long live the Republic.
And with that, folks, a huge shout out to the over 170,000 people that were here by the end of the stream. And we will see you all tomorrow night at 10 p.m. Eastern for the next Nightly War News stream at the usual time. And hopefully, we'll have enough news for a short war video. I know some people are getting disappointed because we haven't been putting them out consistently recently. But the catch is, like, we have to have enough news early in the day to be able to make those videos. So if the news comes out, like, right before the stream, which it did today, it's really hard to make the short war video because the timing just doesn't line up. So we do hope to have one out tomorrow and as consistently as possible, but it's kind of really not up to us on that. It's really more up to the news and when it comes out, but hopefully we'll have one. But in the meantime, though, thank you all for joining us once again, and of course, Slava Ukraine, Herom Slava, get some rest, and good night.